Well, I seem to have gotten the message that we're ready to begin. Is the prosecution ready to begin?
Yes, Your Honor, the prosecution is here. Before we proceed, may the prosecution make introductions today?
I'm sorry, I didn't quite understand what you were asking me.
May the prosecution make introductions today?
Yes, let's do that, and then we'll hear from the defense if they're ready to go.
Good morning, Your Honor. My name is Cara Adams. I, along with my co-counsel, Emma Roeder,
Good morning, Your Honor.
Good morning.
and Brooke Conklin,
Good morning, Your Honor.
Good morning to you.
we represent the prosecution in today's case.
I'm glad to meet all of you. Now, how about the defense?
Yes, Your Honor. May we make appearance at this time?
Would you please?
Good morning, Your Honor. My name is Allison Moore, and I, along with my co-counsel, Kara Luster
Good morning, Your Honor.
Good morning.
and Victoria Agbayfun,
Good morning, Your Honor.
Good morning to you.
represent the defendant in today's case, Dakota Sutcliffe.
All right, are we both ready to begin?
The prosecution just has a few pretrial matters to attend to, Your Honor.
All right, we'll go forward.
First, the state would like to draw this court's attention to stipulation 12. Now, this just stipulates that if Dr. Weber is not called as a witness by either side, then it is mutually agreed upon that the fire at Chucky's Bar was in fact man-made and that paint thinner was used as an accelerant.
All right, if I understand, I think I got this before. These are written stipulations, is that correct?
Yes, Your Honor. We also do have a trial binder for you that has all the stipulations, Midland's rules of evidence, case law, and motions in limine.
Well, if you'll keep that ready for me, I'd appreciate it.
No problem. We'll drop it in the chat for you.
Thank you. You have anything further?
Yes, Your Honor. In addition to that, the state would also like to draw the court's attention to stipulation 14. Now, this stipulates that during today's trial, either side may read onto the record transcripts from Dakota Sutcliffe's previous trial.
All right, it's acceptable.
At this time, Your Honor, the prosecution moves to invoke Rules 603 and 615 to constructively swear in and sequester all witnesses barring party representatives.
Is that agreed with the defense?
Yes, Your Honor.
It's so moved.
Lastly, Your Honor, the prosecution would like to inquire for your preferences for screen sharing. Should we always ask permission prior to screen sharing?
I'm sorry, prior to what?
Screen sharing.
Yes, I'd appreciate that.
And with that, Your Honor, the prosecution is ready to proceed.
Is the defense ready?
The defense has just a few pretrial matters that we would also like to address at this time, if that's okay, Your Honor.
Let me hear them, please.
The defense would like to provide judicial notice that the defendant, Dakota Sutcliffe, our client, will be constructively present in today's trial, and for any identifying purposes can be identified by brown hair and a pink blazer.
Has that previously been agreed upon? Is that acceptable to the prosecution?
Yes, Your Honor.
Fine. Anything else?
Yes, and we'd also like to provide notice of, in accordance to the Tarot Readers Association of the Midlands versus Merrill Dow, specifically in accordance to expert witnesses, the Midlands Rule of Evidence 702 prongs A, B, and C have already been established, and D is the only one that must be established in today's trial.
All right, and I believe I saw something about that in the packet. So I take it that that's agreeable to the prosecution.
Yes, Your Honor.
All right. Does the defense have anything further?
With that, Your Honor, we are ready to proceed into opening statements.
Well, thank you both. The prosecution may begin. Hey, Ms. Conklin, are you to make the opening statement?
Yes, Your Honor.
Oh, you may proceed.
Opposing counsel, Members of the jury, may it please the court. She was running out of time. There are quite a few things that both the prosecution and the defense agree about the night of July 31st. The defense does not dispute that someone was inside of Chuggy's on the night of July 31st, that someone poured paint thinner all over the bar, that someone lit a match and walked out. The defense acknowledges that flames rose high inside of Chuggy's, that the windowless building was full of smoke, it was bursting at the seams. But most importantly, the defense admits that someone lost their life in the fire at Chuggy's. You'll hear that a firefighter by the name of Jalen Williams rushed inside of Chuggy's on the night of July 31st in search of anyone inside who needed saving. And you'll hear that on his rescue mission, Mr. Williams lost his life when the ceiling at Chuggy's collapsed and he was killed instantly. We as the prosecution know who is responsible for the death of Mr. Williams. None other than the owner of Chuggy's herself, Dakota Sutcliffe. And we know why she did it. You'll hear from a forensic investigator today who will tell you that the defendant owed $1 million and that she was running out of time to pay this loan. You'll hear that the pandemic hit Midlands hard, that business at Chuggy's had to close, but the bills kept piling up. You'll hear that Midland State Bank offered extension after extension on this loan until finally the bank had to say, enough. The defendant knew that she could not get the money in time. She knew she was going to lose her investment and be left with nothing. Unless the defendant could collect on her $1.5 million insurance policy at Chuggy's. Then she could walk away debt-free and with $500,000 in her pocket. You'll hear today that with nothing to lose and everything to gain, that the defendant burnt her own bar to the ground, thinking that she had just gotten $1.5 million and solved all of her financial problems. We as the prosecution know that this is what happened on the night of July 31st, and it is our job today to prove this to you beyond a reasonable doubt. Today, we will prove beyond a reasonable doubt that the defendant is guilty of aggravated arson and that she had an intent to defraud because she was running out of time. To do this, we must prove to you three things today. First, that the defendant committed arson when she set Chuggy's on fire. Second, that by setting Chuggy's on fire, the defendant created a substantial risk of serious harm to another person. And third, that the defendant knew of this risk when she set the fire. I'd like to talk about each of those three elements one by one. First, the act of arson. You'll hear today from an employee of Chuggy's by the name of Tobin Johnson, who will tell you that on the day of the fire, Chuggy's received a shipment containing gallons and gallons of paint thinner. You'll then hear from an eyewitness by the name of Skylar DeYoung, who will tell you that just minutes before the fire at Chuggy's, she saw the defendant sneak out the back door of Chuggy's. And when she saw the defendant sneak out the back door of Chuggy's, you'll hear that the defendant reeked of paint thinner. Second, the harm. You'll hear from an account of one of the detectives who was at the scene of the fire. And from that account, you'll hear that Jalen Williams's body had to be dug out from underneath the rubble. And that when his body was pulled from the rubble at Chuggy's, it was covered in severe burns. You'll hear that Mr. Williams was dead before any help could have ever reached him. Third, the knowledge. You'll hear from one of the defendant's own employees that the defendant was an active firefighter in the Midlands community. And as a firefighter in the community, The defendant knew the dangers and the risk that fires possess. Members of the jury, the defendant may be out of time, but you have time today to bring justice for the life of Jalen Williams. At the end of today's trial, my co-counsel, Emma Roeder, will come before you. She will lay out the evidence and the law in today's case, and she will ask you to find the defendant guilty of aggravated arson because the defendant is out of time. Thank you.
Jesus Christ.
Your Honor, the defense is ready to proceed with opening statements whenever you're ready.
Counsel, I apologize. Apparently, I lost you for a moment. You
You're totally fine.
certainly may proceed, yes, please proceed.
Thank you, Your Honor. May it please the court. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen of the jury. Throughout today's trial, you will come to learn that everything is not what it seems. Before you today, I, Kara Lester, along with my co-counsel, Victoria Agbayfun and Allison Moore, we represent the defendant in today's case, Dakota Sutcliffe. Dakota Sutcliffe is not only hardworking, ambitious owner of Chuggy's Bar, but also a passionate volunteer firefighter for the Midlands Fire Department. Dakota Sutcliffe took ownership of Chuggy's Bar in November of 2019, where Chuggy's was turned in from a dive bar to a place where the people of Midlands could go eat, enjoy food, and a few drinks. Dakota Sutcliffe quickly realized that the number of patrons was growing at Chuggy's Bar, and to accommodate to this, she decided to start renovations at her bar. However, Chuggy's fell to no exceptions to the closures and the delays that businesses around the country were experiencing due to COVID-19. Sadly, Dakota Sutcliffe lost her income, her life, her dreams when Chuggy's was found burning to the ground on August 1st of 2020. Now, the prosecution has come forward to you today saying that my client was in a financial state that she couldn't get out of, that she resorted to burning down her own bar. The prosecution has brought forth the charge of aggravated arson, which they must prove to you beyond a reasonable doubt, the highest burden proof. They must prove to you beyond a reasonable doubt all four elements in today's case, which is something they won't be able to do today. Now, as a defense, we hold no burden, but rather will still bring forth to you three witnesses today that will talk to you about the events that were leading up and to the fire at Chuggy's, as well as the fire of Chuggy's itself. Today, you will hear from a witness by the name of Alex Silva. Mr. Silva is a volunteer firefighter who will talk to you all about the firsthand account of going into the fire at Chuggy's Bar. Mr. Silva was working firsthand with the brave, heroic firefighter, Jalen Williams, who lost their life responding to the fire at Chuggy's Bar. And Mr. Silva will talk to you about how the structure of Chuggy's Bar played a significant role in how the fire was ongoing. You will also hear from an expert forensic psychologist by the name of Dr. Mel Jelani. Miss Jelani will talk to you about how there is no eyewitness in today's case that can positively place Dakota Sutcliffe at Chuggy's Bar, starting the fire at Chuggy's Bar before emergency personnel responded to the fire. Lastly, you will hear from Maddox Vaughn, a longtime patron of Chuggy's Bar. Mr. Vaughn will testify to you today and talk to you about how he saw Dakota Sutcliffe over an hour away at a marina at a time in which the prosecution would like you to believe that Dakota Sutcliffe was setting fire to her own bar. Ladies and gentlemen, at the beginning of my time with you, I mentioned that Dakota Sutcliffe is a volunteer firefighter for Midlands Fire Department. I would like for you to ask yourself, why would Dakota Sutcliffe place her own brethren in harm's way? She knew the dangers of the fire. She knew her own friends would be responding to this fire. We will show you today that Dakota Sutcliffe herself even had to go into this fire at Chuggy's Bar. The prosecution in today's case are quick to say that Dakota Sutcliffe is the one who started the fire at Chuggy's Bar. However, you'll be shown that the prosecution, Breckenridge Police Department, and Breckenridge Fire Department neglected to have an adequate investigation into Chuggy's Bar, that there are numerous other people who had it out for Chuggy's Bar, that everything is not what it seems. I would like for you to pay close attention to who was upset that they lost their job at Chuggy's Bar, who had a burning vendetta for the role that Chuggy's played in their life. It was such a tragedy as losing the beloved Jalen Williams. We cannot be quick to assign blame. And with the numerous possibilities of what actually happened on August 1st of 2020, we ask for you to find my client, Dakota Sutcliffe, not guilty. Thank you for your time and consideration in today's case.
Thank you, counsel. Is the prosecution ready to proceed?
Yes, Your Honor. The state is ready to call our first witness, Skylar DeYoung.
You may begin.
Good morning. Please state your name for the court.
Hi, everybody. My name is Skylar DeYoung.
How are you involved in today's case?
I used to be a bartender at Chuggy's, the bar that got burnt down.
Can you tell me about your experience working at Chuggy's?
When I first started working at Chuggy's, it was the epitome of a college bar. You know, I'm talking lights so old that they were basically Dollar Tree strobe lights, floorboards so sticky that every single time you took a step, it would almost take your shoe off. And then the walls were just covered in the most random assortment of junk you've ever seen in your life. It was gorgeous, but all that changed when Dakota took over as the owner.
What changed when the defendant became the owner of Chuggy's?
Dakota essentially gutted the place. I mean, when I say that she renovated everything, I mean everything. It was like an entirely new building by the end of it all.
I'd like to talk about these renovations. What exactly changed inside of Chuggy's?
Well, she started by ripping up all of the old flooring and replacing it with solid French oak hardwood floors. And then her next victim was the bar counter. What used to be just simple granite was now elegant marble. And then she brought in new mink fur bar stool covers. And as if all that wasn't enough, she added crystal chandeliers as far as the eye could see.
Since these renovations were so extensive, did you have to close Chuggy's while the renovations were being complete?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, as a customer, I wouldn't really want to be around while there's, paintbrushes and boxes all over the floor. Yeah, we were closed.
And since the bar was closed, were you still getting paid during these renovations?
Yeah, even though we were closed, the staff was still receiving full paychecks, which was really nice.
So when did Chuggy's reopen from the renovations?
After being closed for all of December, we reopened on the first week of January.
And how was business when Chuggy's reopened?
It wasn't great. Eventually, business got so bad that I had to take a pay cut along with all of the other staff. Those poor minks died for some chronically empty bar stools.
Did business ever improve?
Oh, I wouldn't know. I got fired.
Why were you fired?
Well, as we all know, at the end of March 2020, the governor shut down all bars and restaurants indefinitely, going from closed for renovations to bad business to closed for COVID. It was no surprise that she let most of us go the day after the news broke.
Since you were let go from Chuggy's, was that the last time that you saw the defendant?
No, I saw Dakota once in a parking lot in town, and that would have been about mid-July.
I'd like to talk to you about that time that you saw the defendant in mid-July. Did you talk to her that day?
No, well, I walked over to her, but when I got there, I realized that she was on the phone and I didn't want to interrupt.
Could you hear what the defendant was saying when she was on the phone?
Yeah, she was saying that she wasn't sure how she was going to cover the loan.
Objection,
Chuggy's-
Your Honor, to more prejudicial than probative.
Would you like to address the court on that objection?
Yes, Your Honor, I can further explain. So pursuant to Rule 403, the statements that Ms. DeYoung is about to go into are substantially more prejudicial than probative due to the fact that there's no context or there's no foundation being laid to who Ms. Sutcliffe was on the phone with that day, who was on the other side. Rather, just hearing these statements is substantially more prejudicial at this point than it is probative.
Are you asking me to strike the evidence?
Yes, Your Honor.
I'll withhold my ruling until the conclusion of this testimony.
Of course, Your Honor.
Proceed. Go ahead, proceed.
I was saying that she was talking about how she wasn't sure how she was going to cover the loan because Chuggy's wasn't making enough money. And then she said that she was worried that the insurance payout wasn't going to be big enough to cover the loan.
Did you ever say anything to the defendant about what you overheard?
No, eventually Dakota looked up and saw me and her eyes got like huge and she just frantically rolled up the window and turned away from me.
Now, did you ever see the defendant again after this encounter?
Yeah, I saw Dakota a few weeks later on the night of July 31st, which was the night of the fire at Chuggy's.
Let's talk about the night of the fire. Where did you see the defendant that night?
I first saw her walk out from behind Chuggy's around midnight.
Now, Ms. DeYoung, do you recognize the defendant in court today?
I do.
Could you identify the defendant by an article of clothing?
Yes, she is wearing that pink sweater.
Let the record reflect that the witness has identified the defendant in court today as the person that she saw outside of Chuggy's on July 31st.
So noted.
Moving back to the night of the fire, did the defendant do anything when she came outside of Chuggy's?
Yeah, she started walking away from Chuggy's and like every 5 or 6 steps she would turn and like look over her shoulder. And the whole time she was really jumpy and walking super fast.
Did anything stand out to you about the defendant that night?
Yeah, there was it was a nasty chemical smell that was coming off of her. I mean, like my eyes were watering, it was burning my nose. I could actually taste it. It was terrible.
Do you know what that smell was?
Not exactly, but it reminded me of like the horrible smell of Chuggy's during all of the renovations, especially when Chuggy's was being repainted.
Did you see where the defendant went after she left Chuggy's that night?
Yeah, that night I continued walking in the same direction as Dakota for like about 12 minutes. We walked through the park like I usually do to get home, and eventually we got to the fire station.
What happened when you got to the fire station?
When we got there, Dakota went inside, and as soon as she did, the chemical smell went right with her.
Thank you, Ms. DeYoung. No further questions at this time, Your Honor.
Thank you. You may proceed with your cross.
Thank you, Your Honor. Hello, Mr. Young. I just have a couple questions for you today. So you only worked at Chuggy's part-time,
Yes.
and you claim to be Chuggy's best employee,
I mean, I'd like to think so.
and you thought that when Miss Sutcliffe bought the bar, she was trying to mess up a good thing with the renovations.
Yeah, I really miss the old Chuggies.
And during the time of Miss Sutcliffe's ownership, your hours went up
They did.
and your tips went down.
Yeah, they did.
And during your time at Chuggy's, you lost money.
Yeah, I guess.
And you were angry when the renovations started taking place.
Yeah, I was kind of upset. I like the old Chuggies.
And you were also upset because it caused the bar to be closed down in December.
Yeah.
And then let's fast forward a little bit to March of 2020. That's around the time that you got fired.
Yes.
And when you initially got fired, you felt betrayed and disrespected.
Yeah, like that first day kind of stung a little bit, but I mean, clearly she had the right idea. Like, we're still on Zoom and everything.
Right, but just to ask you back to my original question, you felt betrayed and disrespected.
Yeah, at first.
And you also had to move in with your parents at this point in time.
I did.
So let's talk about that time that you saw Miss Sutcliffe again around mid-July. You were unaware of who she was talking to at that point in time.
Oh, yeah, I don't know.
And you really didn't understand what the conversation was about.
Well, yeah, I mean, I didn't really get it. Like, she was talking about how she was worried she wasn't going to be able to cover the loan and that the insurance payout wasn't going to cover the loan.
Now, Ms. DeYoung, but you didn't know what the other person on the other side of the line was saying.
No.
And you didn't ask Miss Sutcliffe about this phone call conversation.
Oh, no, I went over and I was going to have a conversation with her, but she was on the phone and I didn't want to bug her. And then she didn't want to talk to me after.
So let's talk about that night of the fire, July 31st, 2020. You were walking past Chuggy's.
Yes.
And this was in the middle of the night?
Yeah, it was like around midnight.
And you were alone, as far as you know.
Well, except for Dakota.
Right, but when you first were initially walking, you were alone.
Oh, yeah.
And you were nervous when you were walking this night.
I don't know I don't know what you mean.
You were nervous due to the 2 convicts that were released from prison?
Oh, yeah, that was going on at that time. Yeah, I guess I was thinking about that a little bit.
And you were more cautious on your walk because of this.
Objection, Your Honor, to relevance, if I may be heard.
Yes, please.
Opposing counsel is asking questions about 2 convicts. We don't know anything about these. There's been absolutely no foundation laid. Additionally, there is no relevance to convicts in this case. It makes no fact or matter in today's case more or less likely.
All right, I think that's probably a matter of weight of what she's testifying to, so I'll overrule the objection.
Yes, Your Honor.
So once again, Ms. DeYoung, you were nervous, you were a little bit more cautious because of these convicts.
Yeah, I think so. Yeah, that makes sense.
So let's talk about when you first saw this individual outside of Chuggy's bar. You saw a figure.
Yeah.
And they were wearing a hood.
Yeah, she was.
And it was, once again, it was dark outside, right?
Right.
And there weren't any street lamps in the area.
Nope.
And because this person was wearing a hood, you couldn't tell their hair color.
No.
And you couldn't tell their hair length at this point.
No.
And on that night, you were about 50 feet away from this individual.
50 feet. Well, yeah, so I was across the street, so 50 feet sounds about right.
And let's talk about the smell that you smelled. You said that it was a strong chemical smell.
Yeah.
And you also stated on the direct earlier that it was similar to when Chuggy's was renovating.
Yeah, it was like, we had chemicals all over the place during that.
Now, since you were fired, Ms. DeYoung, you don't know if Chuggy's still had any ongoing renovations, do you?
Oh, no, I don't know.
And so you didn't see anyone else during your walk except for this figure.
Yeah, except for Dakota.
And then moving along, you didn't report anything that you saw until the next day.
Right.
Thank you for your time, Ms. DeYoung. Your Honor, I have no further questions.
Thank you. Is there any redirect?
No redirect, Your Honor. I ask that the witness may turn off her camera and step down from the stand.
All right, counsel, I'm going to overrule the objection that you made during the cross-examination, and I'll allow the evidence.
Yes, Your Honor.
You may call your next witness.
At this time, Your Honor, the prosecution calls Tobin Johnson to the stand. May I proceed?
Yes, please do.
Good morning, Mr. Johnson.
Hi, good morning.
Can you introduce yourself to the court?
Yeah, sure. Hello, my name is Tobin Johnson.
Well, it's nice to meet you, Mr. Johnson.
Nice to meet you too, sir.
How are you involved in today's case?
I was a bartender at Chuggy's for a few years, starting back in 2017, and then I worked there until it burned down.
What was business like at Chuggy's?
It was pretty good, you know? I mean, we had regulars every day. We were a big draw with the college kids on the weekends. They love strong vodka Red Bull. We made that pretty good. So business was solid until, you know, the pandemic hit.
Well, what was business like after the pandemic hit?
I'd say the best way to describe it would be not good. We were open for takeout, but Dakota still had to fire most of the staff. So it was just me and the chef that stayed.
How did the pandemic further affect your job?
Good question. Yeah, I would say negatively. It was not great. I wasn't surprised. I mean, the bar just wasn't making a lot of money anymore. So the chef and I, we were actually working without pay for a little while.
Did Chuggy's Bar ever have to shut down during the pandemic?
Yeah, it shut down in March.
Was Chuggy's ever able to reopen?
Well, we tried. We tried again in May, and we actually got some regulars back. So it was picking up. They were all, you know, saying, let me get a Corona, got old really quickly. Then on July 15th, we got our first case in-house of
What
COVID.
happened? Sorry about that. What happened on July 15th?
Well, the chef FaceTimes me and he's all like, hey man, I've got Corona. And I thought he was joking, but then he's all like, no, seriously, I tested positive. And we had to shut down for 2 weeks. So then, I mean, I offered to be the chef instead, but we didn't want to put food poisoning on top of COVID. So it was probably the wise choice to shut down, which we did.
During that shutdown, did you see the defendant at all?
Yeah, of course. I'd still come in, I'd help however I could. Actually, a few times that she asked for my help with some of the financial info for the bar. It's, you know, I watched some Dave Ramsey, Gary Vee on YouTube, so I've picked up quite a bit of knowledge on the subject.
Do you know why she needed your help?
Yes, she was asking me to look over her loan agreement and some of her emails to see if she could get an extension for the payments because she was running out of time.
What do you mean when you say she was running out of time?
Well, Dakota couldn't keep up with the payments that were on the loan agreement, so I guess that the bar could have been at risk.
Did you find anything that could help out?
No, I didn't. The only other thing I found was this insurance policy that I asked her about.
Would you recognize a copy of that insurance policy if I showed it to you today?
Yeah, absolutely.
Your Honor, permission to screen share what has been marked as Exhibit 7B.
Please, yes, I understand that. Go forward with the exhibit. We'll accept the exhibit. I should have asked you, counsel. I understand that these have all been all been previous. Oh, I see what you've done. I get you. Yes, I see that exhibit, and the I will accept the exhibit. Without objection, I think.
Mr. Johnson, what am I showing you?
This is that fire insurance policy I was just talking about.
Has it been changed or altered in any way?
Not that I can tell.
Is it a fair and accurate copy?
I think so.
Now, when you asked the defendant about this fire insurance policy, what did she say?
It was weird. I pointed it out, and then she gives me this really awkward look, and she says, "That's my backup plan."
What did the defendant mean when she said backup plan?
I didn't know. I was really confused at first, and I didn't know what she meant. So I smiled and I nodded, and then after a few seconds, she explained that if a fire happened at the bar, that she could collect all of the insurance money. So that's actually how I learned how insurance works.
Do you know how much that insurance policy was worth?
Yeah, I do. I asked, and Dakota said that since the renovations were complete, it's worth $1.5 million.
Did you ever see that fire insurance policy again?
Yeah, I did actually.
When was the second time you saw it?
That would be July 31st, the night of the fire.
Let's talk a little bit more about that night. How did your shift start on July 31st?
It was pretty normal. I showed up at around noon, but it got weird when I got there because there was this big shipment of gallons and gallons of paint thinner.
Do you know what that paint thinner was for?
I didn't. It was confusing because we finished all the renovations a while ago, and I thought I'd never have to smell that grody chemically smell ever again.
How was business that evening?
It got back to usual. I started doing my work, but then we got a phone call from one of our customers, and he said that he had COVID and he was in the bar earlier that day. So we had to shut down for another 2 weeks.
How did the defendant respond when you told them about the phone call?
Yeah, when I told everyone, it got a little tense. And then Dakota started shouting and said, "No, we can't close up early tonight."
Did you guys have to close early then?
We had to, yeah. Dakota just kicked everyone out. It was the regulars, the employees, me, everyone. Right as I was heading out the door was when I saw the insurance policy.
Did the insurance policy look the same as it did when you last saw it?
Yeah, pretty much. There's just one part that was circled this time.
What was circled?
The bottom left.
What's on the bottom left?
The part about arson.
Mr. Johnson, did you talk to the defendant again that night?
No, she had this look in her eye, like she'd just been defeated. And as I was leaving, she said, "My dream has gone up in smoke."
Do you know anything about the fire that happened on July 31st?
I know that a fireman died, Jalen Williams. Since Dakota was also a firefighter, sometimes she'd bring him around, and he was a nice guy. So the whole thing is just really unfortunate.
Thank you, Mr. Johnson. Your Honor, I have no further questions.
Thank you. Cross-examination?
Prior to the cross-examination, Your Honor, at this time, the prosecution would like to read the transcripts from Ali Rodrigo onto the record per stipulation 14.
I have to admit, I didn't quite hear. Did you say you have no cross-examination?
I do have a cross-examination, Your Honor.
All right. Now, come back and Counsel Adams and tell me why I should let you do what you want to do before cross-examination.
At any point in today's trial, Your Honor, per stipulation 14, either side may read onto the record the transcripts from Dakota Sutcliffe's previous trial. So prior to cross-examination, at this time, the prosecution would like to read a portion of the transcripts of Ali Rodrigo. He was an investigator in the previous trial onto the record. And then the prosecution will be ready to proceed with cross-examination, Your Honor.
Well, counsel, you tell me what you think about that.
Your Honor, the record can only be read onto this trial if the door was open and we haven't heard any testimony or any background of who this individual is by any of the witnesses here today, and therefore would then go to misleading the jury.
If I may respond to that, Your Honor, per stipulation 14,
What you said you finished. Are you finished with that, Ms. Moore?
Yes, Your Honor, I am finished.
All right. I'm sorry, Ms. Adams. Go forward.
per stipulation 14, all objections have been waived to reading portions of either transcript onto the record. So it is mutually agreed upon, as it is also in the stipulations book that we gave to you during pretrial, that any side, prosecution or defense, may read onto the record trial transcripts from Dakota Sutcliffe.
Well, that might be the case, but explain to me why I should allow you to do that before cross-examination of this witness.
At this time, Your Honor, we would like to read onto the record right after the
Right
exam-
after the cross-examination.
Well, before the cross-examination, just to follow up with the testimony that Tobin Johnson gave on direct examination. Since we just closed direct
That's
examination.
fine, but let's go forward with a cross-examination and then you make your proffer. How about that?
No problem, Your Honor. Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Moore?
Thank you, Your Honor. May I proceed?
Yes, please do.
Good morning, Mr. Johnson. I just have a few questions for you here this morning. You've been working at Chuggy's Bar for a long time, is that right?
Yeah, you could say that. I think it would be about 4 years.
Yes, and you were an employee when the ownership switched from the previous owner to now Dakota Sutcliffe.
Yes, I was.
When Miss Sutcliffe became the owner, more cleaning was expected.
Yeah, which was nice because we didn't do a whole lot before.
And it was made clear that you couldn't serve anyone under the age of 21.
Objection, Your Honor, relevance as to this witness being able to serve anyone under 21. That is not a relevant fact in today's case.
I'm sorry, is that an objection
Yes, Your Honor, it's relevance.
to relevance? I'm going to allow it. So I will overrule your objection.
Yes, Your Honor.
Mr. Johnson, I'm going to go ahead and repeat that question. It was made clear that you couldn't serve anyone under the age of 21.
Right. I just personally wouldn't at all, though.
And you couldn't vouch for anyone who you knew and just forgotten their ID.
Right.
I want to talk more about the renovations that you mentioned on direct. These renovations began Thanksgiving of 2019.
Yes, that's right.
And these renovations included redoing the inside portion of Chuggy's Bar.
Yeah, we basically turned the whole thing inside out. It was wild.
But it also included an outdoor patio.
Yes, getting ready for the summer.
And in order for these renovations to happen, Dakota took out a loan
Yes, she did.
and cleared out her own savings
I think so.
and got some cash from investors.
I think so, maybe.
So is that a yes to my question that she did get cash from investors?
I think I overheard her talking about investors at some point, but she never came up to me and was telling me about investors.
Yes, you don't know who these investors were.
Well, no, it's something that I might have heard in passing, but it was something she never told me. So I wouldn't want to speak definitively on her half.
Let's move forward with the renovations. All the indoor renovations were completed in January of 2020.
Yeah, that's right. We finished up January 5th.
However, the back patio was not finished with these indoor renovations. Is that right?
That's right.
And on July 31st, 2020, that is whenever this big order of paint thinner came into Chuggies.
Yeah, big one.
And Dakota then told you that this was going to be used for the renovations.
Well, she said that she got supplies for renovations, but she didn't explicitly say what the paint thinner was for. She just said they weren't supposed to leave that here.
But she, redirecting you back to my question, she stated that you would now be able to start working on that back patio.
Yeah, but she was unclear about the paint thinner.
Just to clarify for the jury, that is a yes to my question.
Yeah, we were ready to get to work for sure.
And you saw Dakota Sutcliffe the day after the fire on August 1st, is that right?
Yeah, I did.
At Chuggies is where you saw her.
Mm-hmm.
You also saw her wiping tears from her face.
Yeah.
Thank you. I have no further questions, Your Honor.
Thank you. Any redirect?
No redirect, Your Honor. At this time, the prosecution would like to read onto the record portions of Ali Rodrigo's transcript.
That's a previously written statement, is that correct?
Yes.
Yes. So we won't read it in at this time. You can just simply submit that statement and it'll be accepted.
Your Honor, we aren't offering it as an exhibit. Rather, we're just reading a portion of the transcript onto the record for the jury, but we're not actually admitting it as an exhibit at this time.
I think the jury will be able to read it when they go to decide what they want to do. So
Yes,
I don't think it's necessary to read it into the record at this time.
Yes, Your Honor.
You have anything else?
Hello, Your Honor. Can you see and hear me okay?
I can indeed, yes. You're Miss Roeder?
Yes, sir. May I proceed with calling our next witness?
You may indeed, please.
The state calls Noor Khan to the stand. May I proceed with direct?
Yes, go right ahead.
Can you please introduce yourself to the court?
Hello, I'm Noor Khan.
How are you involved in today's case, Mr. Khan?
I'm a detective in the White Collar Crime Division of the MCPD. I specifically investigated any financial motive that the defendant might have had to burn down their property, Chuggies Bar.
How long have you been a detective?
Well, I joined all the way back in 2017, but I spent 10 years in private accounting before that, so I've got quite a bit of time working in this field.
And what were you investigating in today's case?
I was assigned to investigate a tip we received to see whether Dakota Sutcliffe may have financially benefited from the burning of Chuggies.
How did you begin that investigation?
I started by subpoenaing Chuggies business records from the Midland State Bank, focusing on the primary bank account, tax record, and then a loan that the defendant had taken out for the renovations.
Would you recognize a copy of that loan and some of the associated emails if I were to show them to you today?
I would.
Your Honor, permission to share my screen so that this witness can lay foundation for the accuracy of Exhibits 6A, B, and C.
That'll be fine. You can do that.
Detective, what am I showing you right now?
Yes, this is a document containing the loan agreement that Chuggies took out for the renovations, email communication between the defendant and their loan officer, and then it also has a certification from the bank confirming that these were kept in the regular course of business.
Now, are these documents the same as the last time you saw them?
They are.
At this time, the state moves to admit Exhibit 6B and C into evidence.
Counsel, you have an objection?
Yes, Your Honor. The defense objects to hearsay on all of the documents.
I'm sorry, I didn't hear that.
The defense is objecting to hearsay on both the loan agreement and the communications.
If I may be heard on those grounds, Your Honor.
Please, yes.
Sharing my screen just once more. These documents, the loan agreement and all email communications, actually fall under an exception to hearsay as records of regularly conducted business activity, 8036. Now, this document, 6A, is a self-authenticating document from a Joe Gross, the director of the Midlands Records Division. He is the custodian of all documents signed in the course of their business and is in charge of maintaining their email communications. This document, being a self-authenticating one, meets all prongs required for the records of regularly conducted business activity exception.
Your Honor, if I may be heard.
Yeah, I wish I would, because I understood your objection to being directed to his testimony, not to this document. Was I correct in that?
My objection was to the specific documents being entered into evidence.
Well, I'll hear you, but I thought I'll hear you. Yes.
Okay,
How about you let them argue their own?
Excuse me?
Excuse me.
Oh,
Your Honor, may I explain my objection?
yes, please.
So when looking at this specific document 6A, as we do see this specific document, it is primarily just for the loan agreement and email communications saying that they're self-authenticating. I'm not objecting to the authentication of such documents. This document does not go to say that they are records of regularly conducted activity, merely that they are authenticated. And secondly, we have not listed any testimony from this witness today that these documents were in the course of Chuggy's Bar itself, as well as being under the ownership of Dakota Sutcliffe. So as those prongs have not been met in accordance to 8036, I do not see that these are an exception to hearsay.
Well, I'm going to overrule your objection also only on the basis that it was my understanding going into this that these documents were documents that were kept in the regular and ordinary course of business. And that's my understanding. And so far, I'm going to overrule your objection.
Yes, Your Honor. Now, can you please describe this loan?
Yes, it was a $1 million loan taken out with a 4.5% interest, specifically from the Midland State Bank to renovate Chuggy's Bar. It was then supposed to be paid back in monthly installments on the 15th of every month.
You said that this loan is supposed to be paid back in monthly installments. Is that what happened?
Unfortunately, no. I uncovered that the defendant fell behind on their loan significantly once the pandemic started in 2020.
How did you learn that?
Emails. These investigations, they're littered with a lot of numbers, especially when you're on the financial end of things, but it's a lot easier to track what's going on with people when you just listen to what they say. Thankfully, we have a bunch of emails to read that cover just about everything from the beginning.
Did you focus on these emails in your investigation?
Yes, if you can filter all the fluff in the emails, they can actually tell you the full story of how the defendant and her business was being handled during the pandemic.
All right, Detective. Now, before we get to those emails, when did the pandemic impact Chuggy's?
Well, the governor put out a stay-at-home order on March 23rd. After that, all bars and restaurants were forced to close immediately, including Chuggy's. Since they were closed, they had no income for that month, which the defendant was not happy about.
How do you know that?
Well, if you look at an email they sent on April 4th, right there, you can see that Dakota, the defendant, actually went to their loan officer to detail the whole thing. They specifically asked for a furlough program or anything similar because they were unable to make their payment.
Did the bank grant this request for an extension?
Not at first, no. So the defendant actually asked again in an email sent on May 1st. They request another furlough and explicitly say that the bank won't see a dime if the furlough isn't granted. This time, the loan officer sent an email granting the defendant a furlough on the principal loan until June 1st. However, interest payments would still continue to accrue.
Was the defendant able to take this time to catch up on their missing payments?
No,
Objection, Your Honor, lack of personal knowledge.
Let me hear the question again, if you will.
I asked if this witness knows whether or not the defendant was able to catch up on their missing payments during this extension.
Well, I think you'll need a foundation that he had some way to know. I think that's what the objection is, and I'll sustain the objection.
Detective, what kind of materials were you looking at during this time period?
I was looking at all of the transactions that Chuggies had made to the bank, as well as all email communication between the defendant and the bank.
Did you have access to the defendant's loan payment history?
I did.
Now, Detective, I'll ask again. Was the defendant able to use this extension to catch up on their loans?
No, they didn't. They missed their interest payments on the loan in May, and come June 1st, they actually emailed the loan officer again, asking if there was any chance that they were willing to extend the furlough beyond that day.
How did the bank respond to the defendant asking for a second extension?
They responded later that day, actually agreeing to extend the furlough through July 31st, but they do make it clear that this is the final extension and that no further ones will be given.
Detective, was the defendant able to catch up this time?
No, they failed to make their scheduled payment on July 15th, and they emailed their officer that day asking for a third extension.
Did the bank grant a third extension to the defendant?
They did not. The officer responded the same way, stating that the missed payments in March and April and the interest payments from May through July were all due on August 1st and that there were no more extensions.
Detective, you've talked a lot about these missing payments, but how much money was actually due on August 1st?
So adding up those two delinquent payments and the 3 months of missed interest payments, that would have been $19,738.60 due to the bank on August 1st.
Now, did the defendant have that money?
Not in any liquid assets. They did, however, have one asset worth enough to pay it off, a commercial fire insurance policy that the defendant had on Chuggies.
Would you recognize that policy and associated emails if I were to show them?
Of course.
Permission to screen share the authenticated documents of 7A, B, and C for this witness's foundation.
And you can go right ahead.
What am I showing to you, Detective?
This is the fire insurance policy taken out on Chuggies, emails from the defendant to their insurance agent, and then a certification from the insurance company confirming that these were kept in the regular course of business.
Are they the same as the last time you saw them?
They are.
The state moves to admit Exhibits 7C and B into evidence.
Counsel?
No, Your Honor, it is the defense's understanding that Exhibit 7B has already been admitted into evidence.
Fine, then it's granted. Your motion's granted.
Yes, Your Honor. Can you please describe this policy, Detective?
Of course, it's a standard fire insurance policy with some associated emails included. The defendant took it out in October of 2019 to insure their bar for $1.5 million after they had finished their elaborate renovations.
Now, was there anything significant in these emails?
Yes, actually, we can see that the defendant emails their insurance agent asking if Chuggies is still insured. And she actually does this on July 15th at 11:09 a.m.
Is this date important?
Oh yeah, if you pull up that last email from the loan officer again, the one confirming the August 1st deadline, you can see that it was sent on July 15th at 11:03 a.m. meaning the defendant just so happened to confirm that their $1.5 million fire insurance policy was still valid just 6 minutes later.
Now, would this insurance payout have been enough to cover the defendant's loan?
Yes, it would have covered the entirety of the loan and left her with a few $100,000 extra.
Objection, Your Honor, to misleading the jury, if I may be heard.
Yes, what's your objection?
To misleading the jury, specifically when referring to the fire insurance policy with the amount of $1.5 million. There are two amounts on this specific fire insurance policy, and the testimony that we had just heard was only eliciting that $1.5 million, which is confusing to the jury because there are two amounts, and this specific witness cannot testify that only one amount would be paid out in this instance.
Well, let me ask you, isn't that something you could have brought up on cross-examination?
Yes, Your Honor.
Yeah, I will overrule your objection.
Did you get to finish your answer, Detective?
Not completely. It would have been enough to cover the entirety of the loan, as well as give her a few extra $100,000 in the pocket.
Now, Detective, what would have happened if the defendant failed to pay the $20,000 they owed on August 1st?
Well, if the defendant failed to make that payment, the bank could have taken legal action and potentially have taken the bar.
Thank you. At this time, I have no further questions.
Thank you. Cross-examination?
Yes, Your Honor. May we proceed?
Yes, please.
Hi, Detective Khan. My name is Kara Lester. I'm just going to ask you a few questions today. I would first like to dive into your analysis of the loan agreement, Exhibit 6B, that has already been admitted into evidence. If I could have my co-counsel pull that up. Mr. Khan, if I could just direct your attention to portion 2.7.2 on this specific document titled My Insurance. So according to this document, the loan agreement, there had to be an insurance policy maintained in accordance with this loan document at Chuggy's Bar, correct?
That's right. The standard fire insurance policy that the defendant had taken out for the bar satisfies this requirement.
Thank you. And now directing your attention to 2.9 of this specific loan document. So in accordance to this completion of improvements, now if renovations had been completed at Chuggy's Bar, there had to be proof given to Midland State Bank, correct?
Yes, a certificate would have had been issued.
And you have no certificate in your possession.
I don't have that certificate.
So you have no documentation that renovations at Chuggy's Bar were complete.
I don't have any personal documentation. I do, however, know that in this contract, it actually requires the renovations to be completed before January of 2020.
So referring you back to my question, you have received no documentation up until this date that renovations have been completed at Chuggy's Bar.
Other than this contract, which says they have to be completed by January of 2020, I have no other official documentation.
So that's a yes, you have no official documentation that renovations have been completed.
Your Honor, objection to asked and answered.
I'll permit her to follow this. You go forward, counsel.
So to ask, thank you, Your Honor. So to ask my question again, that's a yes, you have received no documentation that renovations have been completed.
Not besides this.
Thank you. Now moving on to your analysis of the fire insurance policy, I'm going to have my co-counsel bring this up. It is 7B that's already been admitted into evidence.
I'm sorry, was that directed to me?
I'm sorry, Your Honor. I was just saying that my co-counsel is going to bring forth the exhibit that's already been admitted into evidence, Exhibit 7B. Mr. Khan, when looking at this exhibit, you can see that there's $1.5 million post-renovation for a property evaluation, correct?
That's right.
And it's $425,000 pre-renovations.
That's correct.
Now, you have no knowledge that renovations have been completed at Chuggy's Bar.
I didn't confirm with anyone at the bar if they had been fully completed.
So to direct you back to my question, you have no knowledge that renovations have been completed at Chuggy's Bar.
That's correct.
Thank you. Now, Your Honor, I have prepared, a visual aid to go through the amounts in today's case. May I share that and go through it with this witness?
Tell me what the visual aid is going to do?
Of course. So this specific visual aid has the amount of the fire insurance policy listed. And then it also is going to go through calculations of the loan amount, and then the final calculation of what Dakota Sutcliffe would have if both were followed through correctly.
All right, and I take it this has all been taken from the materials that both counsel have, is that correct?
Yes, Your Honor.
Your Honor. But actually,
Just a minute. Just a minute. My next question was, has your aid been shared with Ms. Roeder?
The visual aid has been shared in a meeting previous to this trial. However, it is still subjected to objections from opposing counsel if they deem so.
Fine, then Ms. Roeder, you have an objection to this.
yes, I do, Your Honor. If
Let me hear your objection.
opposing counsel could share the visual aid, I think it would help explain. Now, as we've just heard, $425,000 is a minimum payout on the insurance document. And on the right-hand side, we can see the loan amount being due. I would object to misleading to the jury because this is the entire loan amount that Dakota Sutcliffe had due over the course of many years. But on August 1st, we've heard that they only had $20,000 due. This number misleads the jury as to whether or not Dakota Sutcliffe's insurance payout would have been enough to cover their loan.
Your Honor, if I may be heard.
Well, I'm going to allow her to use this visual aid, but I will allow her after this examination proceeds that you may cross-examine him again on this visual aid. So that you can go forward. Excuse me, yes, go forward.
Thank you, Your Honor. Now, Mr. Khan, as you previously have stated, the insurance policy pre-renovations was $425,000, correct? I'm sorry, could you repeat that? I think you cut out on my end.
That is correct.
Thank you. And the the loan agreement in the totality was $1 million plus interest, leaving about $1.3 million total.
That's only if Ms. Sutcliffe was making the payments each month. The loan agreement at its value is still $1 million.
So just to clarify, with the interest rate, it would be around $1.3 million.
With the full interest payments, yes, it would be.
Thank you. So on direct examination, you testified that the amount that would be granted to Dakota Sutcliffe if the fire insurance policy went through would be over $500,000, right?
$1.5 million, yes.
But you testified that there'd be a profit.
That is correct.
Now, when looking at the fact that there's no documentation that renovations have been completed, there'd actually be a loss of money for Dakota Sutcliffe, correct?
Actually, that's not entirely clear. We know that renovations had started and the fire insurance policy functions on a scale. The value of $425,000 only applies if no renovations had been completed at all. I know that isn't the case here.
So to direct you back to my question, so you don't have documentation that renovations were completed?
Not that they were completed, no. We know well and done that they were far into the renovation process, though.
And the fire insurance policy, does it say that there's a specific scale for the post or pre-renovation amount?
No, that's just how these insurance policies work. If you imagine renovations were 99% complete, it wouldn't still be worth $425,000 if they forgot to put up a sign.
But regardless, it wouldn't be that $1.5 million.
No, it would just be much closer to 1.5 million.
Thank you. Now, moving on in your evaluation in the case of Chuggy's Bar, now you found that there was no fraud in your evaluation.
In which part?
Your evaluation of the finances at Chuggy's Bar?
The only time where I found that there was no fraud were the finances before the loan was taken out. Anything after October 2019, there could have been fraud.
So to refer you back to my question, you have not found any fraud in obtaining a loan document or running Chuggy's Bar.
In obtaining the loan document, that's correct.
So you have not found any fraud in today's case.
No, that's not true. I haven't found any fraud in the way the defendant obtained the loan agreement. Anything that happened after the loan agreement and the repayment of the loan, there's evidence that there could have been fraud.
Now, in the information that you provided to today's court, did you specify that there could have been fraud?
Yes, I believe that's what I just said.
So you have provided documentation of all of the information that you've provided to today's court, correct?
I'm going to need further clarification what you mean by documentation.
Of course. So you, in an affidavit, provided all of the information that you'd be testifying to in today's court.
Yes, I submitted a full report.
Now, in this report, did you say that there was a possibility that there could be fraud in your evaluation?
Yes.
You stated that there was fraud at the end of the totality of your investigation.
Yes, I stated that the repayment of the loans and the intention or the claim of the fire insurance could have been fraud.
So it's your testimony today that the evaluation of the loan and the running of Chuggy's Bar was fraudulent.
The repayment of the loan and the claim on the fire insurance could have been fraudulent.
Your Honor, if you could just give me 1 second, I'm going to ask my co-counsel to pull up an affidavit.
Certainly.
Thank you, co-counsel. Now, Detective Khan, this is the affidavit that you have provided in today's court with all of the information that you'd be testifying to today. It's signed with your name, correct?
That is correct.
And is this a fair and accurate copy of this specific report that you've provided?
That's right.
Now, when looking at this specific document, you have stated that there's no fraud found in the evaluation of the loan agreement.
Again, just to clarify, that refers to everything prior to October 8th of 2019. That refers to the actual obtaining of the loan agreement. Where I'm saying there could have been fraud is after that loan payment was obtained and the actual fire and then the claiming of the fire insurance money.
Now, in your report, you didn't say that there could possibly be fraud after the loan agreement after that October date, correct?
I say that if there was an indication of fraud, it would have been after the actual payment of the loans and the actual return to it. I actually put it right there in that report. It says right there, if you look at the last line, any crime in this case was not Sutcliffe committing fraud to obtain a bank loan, but rather the step Sutcliffe took to pay back that loan after renovation delays and COVID shutdowns.
So again, that is specifically saying that there's no fraud found.
It says right there, if there was fraud, it would have been after the loan payments were starting to be made.
Now, in today's case, there has been no fraud charges brought up against Dakota Sutcliffe.
I'm not aware of the specific charges that they're bringing. I believe it's aggravated arson though.
But again, there's been no charges of fraud brought forth from your investigation.
I'm unsure. You'd have to ask them.
I'd have to ask the White Collars Crime Division.
The prosecutors who are bringing forward the charges against the defendant.
Thank you. Sorry, Your Honor, I have no further questions for this witness.
All right, Ms. Roeder, I granted you the right to question this witness on the exhibit that she provided of a visual aid. Would you like to question him?
Yes, very briefly, Your Honor, if I may.
You may go ahead.
In your best estimation, how much was the insurance document worth?
It would have had to have been close to $1.5 million. We know the renovations were at least contracted to be completed by January of 2020, and there were no official change orders made to extend those renovations beyond that time.
And Detective, how much money was going to be due on August 1st?
The amount of money actually due on August 1st was not $1 million, but around $20,000.
And would the minimum payout of this insurance document cover that amount?
Yes, even $425,000 would be enough to make both that payment and several years of payments beyond that.
Thank you. I have no further questions for this witness.
Ms. Lester, I'm a little reluctant to ask you if you would have any further questions of this witness with regard to what he's just testified to. And if you do, I would remark that it's going to be just one-shot questions. You have any questions?
Yes, Your Honor, I just have one question. Now, Mr. Khan, you have received no documentation in today's case that the renovations were even close to being complete or that they were complete.
The actual status of the
I'm sorry, could you repeat that for me? I think you cut out just a little bit.
I don't have any documents regarding the actual status of the renovations. That is correct.
Thank you, Your Honor. I have no further questions for this witness.
Ms. Roeder, excuse me, counsel, have you anything further?
Nothing further for this witness. May he step down from the stand?
Certainly. Thank
Now,
you.
before the state rests our case in chief, we would take this time to submit the Ali Rodrigo statement that we were referring to earlier into evidence for the jury's perusal at their own time, like you requested. And also per stipulation 3, if we may tender exhibit 1, the autopsy of Jalen Williams. Both sides have agreed that this is pre-admitted in this case.
All right, well, if the defense has no objection to this, and I can see that they do, it would be admitted. Does the
Your Honor,
yeah,
the defense counsel doesn't have any issues with exhibit 1 per stipulation 3 to being tendered to the bench. However, we do have issues with exhibit 29, or I believe the prior trial transcript of Ali Rodrigo being admitted at this point in time or being tendered to the bench.
all right, you want to tell me what your objection is?
Yes, Your Honor. The objection is simply to misleading the jury at this point in time pursuant to 403.
Well, misleading the jury, I don't quite understand. Can you elucidate a little bit on that?
Yes, Your Honor. Throughout this entire trial, we did not hear any sort of foundation for these statements being laid. We did not hear of this detective, Ali Rodrigo. So admitting this piece of evidence, exhibit 29, to the jury at this point in time is essentially giving the jury a document that does not really we haven't even heard any of this foundation being laid to what these statements that they're wanting or what the opposing counsel is wanting to administer to the jury.
If I may respond, Your Honor.
Yes, please.
Now, these documents have already been laid for foundation. Prior to today's trial, defense counsel agreed that the foundation existed for these documents. It is completely improper and untimely for them to raise a lack of foundation now. Now, us submitting and tendering it to the jury is not an exhibit being used in evidence. Rather, to comply with Your Honor's request to have the physical documentation rather than just being read aloud.
Yes, it was my understanding coming into this that all of the exhibits had been previously authenticated and that they were acceptable. If that's the case, if it's an acceptable exhibit, it may go to the jury. So I'll overrule your objection.
Thank you, Your Honor.
Do you have anything further?
Nothing further, Your Honor. We rest our case in chief and would ask for a brief 5 to 10-minute recess based on your honor's discretion to prepare for defense counsel's case in chief.
I'm at your beck and call. If it's 5 or 10 minutes, that's fine with me. We have timekeepers here, and they're the ones who tell me which we're going to have. So if the timekeeper can speak up now and tell me whether it's 5 or 10 minutes or when we're coming back, I think that would.
Your Honor, it seems like we have enough time to be able to take anywhere between 5 to 10 minutes. I guess the prosecution requests 7, if that's okay with you.
Sounds like you're splitting the baby. We'll take 7 minutes and we'll come back and start with the defense.
Yes,
Thank
Your
you, Your
Honor.
Honor.
Let's move in.
All right, thank you.
Mr. Emery, did that work? That link?
Yeah, I tried going to that. Are you here with me?
So I can't see your screen.
You can't, well, I don't know why you can't see my screen, but I'm still without a ballot. I went to that, clicked
So
on
it's-
that site that you gave me,
Uh-huh.
and I was completely out of Zoom and had to come back into Zoom to even get back here.
Yeah, so Zoom is separate from where the ballot is. The ballot's going to be on that website. So you
Yeah.
just need to go back and forth.
Well, I'll try it, I guess. Let me try it here. Are you still there?
Yep, I can hear you.
Okay, all right. So what do I do? Let me see. I go round one.
Yep, and then there should be room
Yeah.
J.
What is it? I don't know which one is J here. Weekend.
It should say, there should be a column for room A through J.
Oh, I see. Yeah, I see J. Yeah. Click
So
for
there-
ballot. I see
there
that.
you go. So click that.
Okay. Now I put my, oh, I see. All right. Okay.
So yeah, you just put everything into that.
Okay. So, oh, I see. Okay, so do I fill this out now and then come back to it or what?
Yes, so fill in everything that's happened up till now, and then after each part, you want to go back to the ballot, fill it in, and then come back to Zoom.
Okay, and then I come back and then what do I do? Just leave it here and I come back to it?
Yep. So just flip from Zoom to the ballot to fill it in and back to Zoom. And then once everything is done, there's going to be a
Yeah,
click to submit button at the very bottom of the ballot.
okay.
But you'll
All
want to do
right,
that when you're done.
thanks. I'll do that, I guess.
Your Honor, would you like us to extend our recess a little bit to give you time to get the ballot filled out? And you could just let us know when you're done.
I don't know what, if you're talking to me, I can't, I don't understand what you're saying.
So here, let's do this. Mr. Emery, if you could fill out the scores and comments for opening statements and then the prosecution case in chief, and then let the students know when that's done, and then they can proceed with the second half of the trial. But input the scores from the first half now.
Oh, so you want me to submit it after I've finished this?
So you submit at the very end of the trial. So just fill in the stuff that's happened so far right now, and then proceed with the second half of the trial.
Okay, all right, well, I guess I'll try it. Okay,
All right, thank you. And captains, if need be, we can extend all loss. So
We'll keep you updated on that. Thank you very much.
thank you.
Ms. Timekeeper, I expect you will tell us when the 7 minutes is up and when you're ready for us.
Yes, Your Honor, we can just proceed whenever you're ready with that ballot, so just let us know.
Well, if everybody's ready, if everybody's here and ready to go, I'm ready anytime they are. I see the defense is here. I see the prosecution is here. You've got your witnesses and all your co-counsels ready to go?
Yes, Your Honor, the defense is ready to proceed.
This prosecutor?
The state is also ready to proceed, Your Honor.
Well, then I'm ready to hear you.
Your Honor, the defense would first like to call Dr. Mel Jelani to the stand.
Please do so.
May we proceed, Your Honor?
You certainly may.
Dr. Jelani, can you please state your full name for the court?
Yes, I'm Dr. Mel Jelani.
And what is your occupation?
Well, I'm a forensic psychologist, and I was just hired to analyze the validity of the interrogation techniques, confessions, and eyewitness testimony in the case today.
And what education have you received pertaining to your occupation?
So I obtained my bachelor's in forensic psychology from the University of Arizona, and then I furthered my education and got a doctorate of clinical psychology at the University of Chicago.
Dr. Jelani, can you explain to the jury about your purpose of testifying today?
Sure. So I'm just hired to examine any environmental factors that could have influenced or impacted any eyewitness accounts dealing with today's case. And in no way am I testifying today about the reliability or the credibility of any witnesses.
Dr. Jelani, let's look at what materials did you review for your case or of this case today?
So I reviewed the affidavits of Kieran Singh, Skylar DeYoung, and Maddox Vaughn, as well as exhibits and police records.
And when looking at such affidavits and exhibits, what in particular in your field do you look for?
So I look for sources of noise or deficiencies within the vision and memory processes. And all of these are sufficient for me to come to conclusions to a reasonable degree of scientific certainty.
And did you apply these methods to the facts of the case today?
Yes, ma'am.
So, Dr. Jelani, what is noise?
So noise is just anything that can influence or impact the visual or memory processes of an individual. So for example, say you're in your car and you're sitting at a red light. Then all of a sudden you see a sign blinking out of your right peripheral, or your phone is dinging. All those things would be considered noise because they draw your attention away from the red light, which has turned green now, which made you miss that green light.
Is reviewing affidavits for sources of noise or deficiencies a current process or practice in your field?
Yes, in the field of psychology, peer-reviewed studies and research are all common practice for looking at sources of noise while examining the visual and memory processes.
Dr. Jelani, let us walk through your creative process a little bit. How do you typically break down someone's recollection of events?
So I've actually prepared a visual aid just to help clarify, if someone wouldn't mind pulling that up for me.
Your Honor, permission to display the visual aid to assist Dr. Jelani in her testimony today. Your Honor. Oh, I think you're muted, Your Honor.
You're correct. Thank you very much.
No problem.
I said, has that been shared with the prosecution?
Yes, it has.
And all right, then without objection, certainly. Go ahead.
Your Honor, yes, okay. Co-counsel, can you please pull that up? Perfect, thank you. So Dr. Jelani, how do you typically break down someone's recollection of events?
So everything pretty much comes down to vision and memory. So in my field, we have this acronym called SPR, which stands for sensation, perception, and retrieval, which me and my colleagues refer to as the SPUR method.
Dr. Jelani, let's examine each step of the SPUR method. What is sensation?
So sensation is just how the eyes are actually seeing things. Some environmental factors are going to be things that can affect this. Also, noise can affect this stage as well.
What sort of noise impacts the sensation stage?
So some common noise factors in the sensation stage include glare or shadows, the level of illumination, so how well lit an environment is, the angle the object or event is perceived from, the length of time that the object is being viewed, and then conditions that can reduce visibility, which include color blindness or distance.
Dr. Jelani, let's move on to that second part, perception. What is perception?
So perception only takes a small part of what we sense and then assigns meaning to it.
Now, why is perception an important thing to consider?
We'll take this photo, for example. So you're walking in the wilderness and you see this long, wavy object with a pattern on it, and you perceive this to be a snake. But upon further investigation, you see that this is actually just a frayed rope. So everything is not what it seems. If you look at the left of this photo, you'll see the frayed rope. So it's just perception is just makes things seem one way, but in all actuality, they're not.
And let's look at that final step of the SPUR method, retrieval. What is retrieval?
So this is just how we analyze the memory of an individual. So this is the process where stored information is accessed and then brought forward. And noise can also affect this stage as well.
What noise impacts retrieval?
So intrusion errors can affect this stage, which are basically just past memories with an individual that fill in the blanks of new memories being created. Also alcohol consumption, prior experiences with this object or event, new information that can following the event, how many times the event was retold, and then outside content that can update that memory.
So let's move on to the specific observations that you made throughout the different affidavits that you analyzed for today's case. Let's move on to Ms. DeYoung's recollection of July 31st, 2020. What did you analyze to come to your conclusions?
I analyzed her affidavit.
So what did you examine about the sensation stage of Ms. DeYoung?
Well, I noticed 5 different things. First, Ms. DeYoung had viewed this individual in a low illumination environment. Second, Ms. DeYoung and the person being viewed themselves were not well lit. Also, Ms. DeYoung only saw parts of this person's face. Ms. DeYoung saw this person wearing a hood over their head, making Ms. DeYoung not able to see this person's hair color or length. And lastly, Ms. DeYoung was approximately 50 feet away from this individual.
Is there anything in particular that you observed about her perception?
Yes, so in my field, noise factors that were present in Ms. DeYoung's sensation stage could have altered their perception.
So let's move on to that third step, retrieval. Is there anything that you notice about the retrieval of Ms. DeYoung's memory?
Yes, so outside content such as reading an article in the newspaper could have updated Ms. DeYoung's memory of the event that she had when she had seen that figure that night. Also, the activity was not reported until the following day. And then also prior experiences such as working with Ms. Sutcliffe and knowing that they were a volunteer firefighter could have also served as intrusion errors by filling in those gaps.
Now, Dr. Jelani, you also reviewed some police records for your case today. And from these 2 convicts that were released from prison. Why did you analyze these records?
I analyzed these records because these 2 individuals appear to have the same height and build as Ms. Sutcliffe.
And who were these 2 individuals?
The 2 individuals were Danny Dawson and Ruel Ellis, and they both had a connection to Chuggies.
Objection, Your Honor, to lack of foundation at this time, if I may be heard.
Counsel,
Your Honor,
you want to respond to that, Ms. Abujafan?
Yes, Your Honor. I can respond to that lack of foundation. Your Honor, specifically what we're seeing is that this witness, Dr. Jelani, had reviewed police records in order to come to her conclusions. I'm simply asking her what she did review or what she found out from these police records.
if I may be heard on those grounds, Your Honor.
Well, I'd like to hear what the question was again before you respond.
Yes, Your Honor. The question was, who were these two individuals? Like, who were the two individuals, police records that you reviewed?
All right, yes, you may respond, Ms. Runner.
Your Honor, this question seems untimely as we have no understanding of whether or not these witnesses have any connection to this case. They've laid foundation that these two ex-convicts have been released, but we have no understanding as to whether or not they were in the area, had any impact on Ms. DeYoung's identification, or could be relevant to this case at all. That foundation just hasn't been laid yet.
Well, I think what we'll do is we'll let her proceed along the lines that she wants to go, and you may state your objection again when it goes a little further,
Yes, Your Honor.
if it's still if you still want to do so.
Yes, Your Honor.
Yes, Your Honor. So Dr. Jelani, who were these two individuals, if you could repeat that for the court today?
Yes, they were Danny Dawson and Ruel Ellis.
And you mentioned earlier that they had a connection to Chuggies. What connection did they have?
So Danny Dawson was convicted of manslaughter after driving under the influence after being served at Chuggies Bar. And Ruel Ellis was convicted of murder, and a bartender at Chuggies was a key witness in that case.
Thank you for your testimony, Dr. Jelani. Your Honor, I have no further questions.
All right.
Your
Uh,
Honor, before I proceed, I would re-raise that lack of foundation objection, as they
Yeah,
haven't.
I think she certainly brought the relevance into this. I would overrule your objection,
Yes, Your Honor. May I proceed with cross?
please.
Dr. Jelani, you're an expert with eyewitness identification, right?
Yes.
So you're familiar with what a typical eyewitness identification looks like.
For the most part, yes. Everybody varies though.
Well, in the case of Skylar DeYoung's identification, there are a few things that just aren't so typical, right?
What exactly are you referring to?
Well, one thing that you know about the typical eyewitness identification is that the witness isn't usually familiar with the perpetrator. Isn't that right?
Most of the time, yes.
But in the case of Ms. DeYoung, she knew the defendant very well.
Yes, I do believe Miss DeYoung worked with the defendant, yes.
Well, she worked for the defendant for years leading up to that identification, right?
Yes.
And during her identification, she reports seeing parts of the defendant's face.
Yes.
Now, you would say that the fact that she is so familiar with the defendant makes her identification a more reliable factor, right?
Objection, Your Honor, to specific. I'm sorry, Your Honor.
Tell me your objection.
Oh, objection, Your Honor, to improper expert testimony.
I don't quite understand your objection.
Improper expert, what the opposing counsel is asking Dr. Jelani to testify to is
Yeah.
improper today, specifically looking at the orders in motion of limine that were provided for this case today. And I can further expand on that if you would like, Your Honor.
Well, it seems to me she's just trying to see whether or not she's testing whether or not that she had a good enough view to identify the person. I think that's it. I don't think I need anything further. I think I'll overrule your objection.
Your Honor.
Dr. Jelani, the fact that Skylar DeYoung is so familiar with the defendant means it is more likely that she can identify them by parts of their face, right?
For the normal person, yes, but there are things in my field called face blindness, which simply means that even your own mother, you wouldn't even recognize sometimes in a split second.
Dr. Jelani, we'll get to that in just a minute, but for right now, the fact that Ms. DeYoung is so familiar with the defendant makes it more likely that she can identify them by parts of their face.
Yes, that was one factor that was more likely that she did.
She also describes seeing the defendant's distinct walk.
Yes.
And you would agree again that her familiarity means that she'd be able to identify someone by that distinct walk. Isn't that right?
Not 100% accurately. It could have been the defendant and it could not have been. It really just depends on the person.
Dr. Jelani, directing you back to my question, her familiarity means that it is more likely that she'd be able to identify the defendant by their walk. Isn't that true?
Yes, it is more likely.
Now, there's another factor that's not so typical of an eyewitness identification, right?
Yes.
That would be the length of time.
Yes, she did follow the individual for a period of time.
Right. And you know that most identifications happen in a split second.
Most of the time, yes.
And like you just said, that's not the case for Skylar DeYoung's identification.
No.
She followed this person for 10 minutes, right?
Yes, in the dark though, as well.
Dr. Jelani, you would agree that the longer an identification lasts, the more reliable it can be considered. Isn't that right?
Yes, that is true.
So 10 minutes is significantly longer than that single instant, right?
Yes, that is correct.
So you would agree that there are substantial factors towards Ms. DeYoung's reliability in this case. Isn't that true?
Your Honor, I would like to re-raise my objection to improper expert opinion at this time, and I can further explain.
Oh, I did cut you off the last time, but I'll listen this time. Yes, I'll listen.
Thank you, Your Honor. So when we're looking at this, Dr. Jelani, and with this line of questioning that opposing counsel is going through, we're asking a witness today to testify on the credibility or the reliability of another witness, which today that should be left up to the jury. And when we're looking at the orders in motion of limine, we see specifically that Dr. Jelani cannot come to the conclusions of a witness's eyewitness identification or testimony, whether it is credible or not credible. And in this case, opposing counsel is asking this witness to do so.
I'm going to overrule your objection, and it's on this basis. You offered this witness to certainly identify, to I guess, help the identification of the person that she is, now dealing with. And it seems to me that she is simply going into that. She's not asking for an expert opinion, I don't believe. She's asking whether or not the criteria that she has offered, whether or not this criteria makes one more or less capable of identifying. Now, that's what I take from it. And so on that basis, I would overrule your objection, but it's a good objection.
Thank you, Your Honor.
Dr. Jelani, you would agree that there are substantial factors that point towards reliability of Ms. DeYoung's testimony. Isn't that right?
Yes, and there are also factors that go towards the unreliability as well.
Dr. Jelani, I just need a simple yes or no for the record. You'd agree that there are factors of reliability. Isn't that right?
Yes.
Thank you. I have no further questions for this witness.
Any redirect?
No, Your Honor, I just asked that this witness may be able to step down from the virtual stand.
Certainly. And you go forward with your next witness.
The defense would like to call Alex Silva to the stand.
Yes, please go forward.
Thank you, Your Honor. Good afternoon. Could you please state your name for the court?
Yeah, hi, my name is Alex Silva.
Mr. Silva, what do you do for a living?
Well, currently I work at the Midlands Department of Parks and Recreation, but I also volunteer as a firefighter in my spare time.
So how long have you been volunteering as a firefighter?
Well, I was a full-time firefighter for about 8 years until a fairly recent incident, but now I just volunteer in my spare time.
Now let's move forward into today's case. Before today, did you know the defendant, Dakota Sutcliffe?
Yes, I did. met Dakota back in about 2016, whenever she came onto the department as a volunteer firefighter.
So what, can you explain what it was like working with Dakota Sutcliffe?
Yeah, working with Dakota was great. She was a great firefighter. She showed up on time. In fact, would even go above and beyond most others. I mean, I remember one time she helped a little old lady, escorted her to the hospital. I think the lady had some sort of smoke inhalation or something like that. And Dakota wanted to make sure that she was okay.
Now let's switch gears and talk about the victim in today's case, Jalen Williams. Did you know Jalen before today?
Yeah, I did.
And how did you know Jalen?
So yeah, Jalen and I were best friends. We grew up together and spent just about every waking moment together throughout our growing up years. We ended up getting kind of split through college, took different paths in life, but life has a funny way of bringing people back together, and we ended up meeting each other back up at Midland Center Fire Department, and we're happy to have each other back in our lives.
And moving on to July 31st of 2020, were you working this night?
Yes, I was.
And do you recall getting a call for a fire?
Yeah, I believe the call that night came in just a little after midnight.
Where was this call for?
So we found out that the call was going to be for a place called Chuggy's Bar in Midland Center.
And after receiving a call for a fire, what is your typical next steps?
So once we receive a call, that's whenever we jump into action. We put on our gear and head towards the truck to head off to the scene.
And on this night, when you arrived at the scene of Chuggy's Bar, what happened next?
Yeah, so whenever we arrive on the scene, our big thing is to assess the area. That particular night, our big concern was checking to make sure that there wasn't any potential for or that there hadn't already been a flashover or something like a backdraft. Those things can be pretty dangerous if you don't pay attention.
And how can a flashover be dangerous?
Yeah, so a flashover can cause the scene to go from seemingly normal to completely overwhelming in a matter of minutes. Whenever you're in the scene, it's almost just like a snap of a finger. So if you're not careful and don't follow proper procedure, it can be a pretty bad scene.
So moving further into your
one, if I may be heard.
Yes.
This witness is giving an improper.
Excuse me?
Yes, Your Honor, to 701, if I may be heard.
You have an objection. So what is your objection?
To 701, improper lay opinion.
All right, you tell me, go for it and let me hear your objection.
Yes, Your Honor. This witness is giving an improper lay opinion because pursuant to Rule 701, all testimony by a lay witness cannot be based on any technical, scientific, or specialized knowledge. Now, since this witness is a firefighter, he has testified to that. He is now testifying using specific technical terms to his profession. Terms like flashover and backdraft are technical terms that a lay witness cannot testify to. He can describe what he has seen, but to use those technical terms in regards to that is improper.
Well, I have to admit, is this 7.1 of the rules?
701, yes.
Well, let me take a look at that. That's a strange one. Huh? Opinion testimony?
Yes, 701C specifically lays out the prong that says a testimony cannot be based on scientific, technical, or specialized knowledge.
Cannot be based on technical or specified knowledge within the scope of Rule 702. Well, if I understand this correctly, he's not allowed to provide expert testimony. And from what I've heard, tell me what expert testimony it is you believe he's testified to.
Yes, Your Honor, this witness using terms that are specific to his firefighter profession, like categorizing a fire as having had a backdraft or a flashover. Those specific terms are specific to his profession and are technical in nature, which is outside the realms of 701C.
Your Honor, may I respond on those
I
grounds?
wish you would.
Yes, so Mr. Silva is simply just testifying to what typically the procedure that he follows. He's not giving an opinion or coming to a conclusion at this time for expert testimony, which would then fall into 702.
Yes, frankly, that's where I come down. I don't believe that his use of technical terms, which may or may not be readily understood by laymen, I don't think this is expert testimony under Rule 702 and 701, and consequently, I'm going to overrule your objection.
Yes, Your Honor.
Mr. Silva, so going further into your assessment at the fire of Chuggy's, what were your next steps after viewing if there was a flashover or anything like that?
Yeah, so after we assessed the fire, or after that night, whenever we finished assessing the fire, we had to gain entry into the building, and also wanted to establish something called like horizontal ventilation. So Jalen had to break down the back door, and I was ended up poking holes in the side to establish that ventilation. You know, the timing of this is where it gets very crucial. Otherwise, it could lead to disaster.
And can you further elaborate on that when you were talking about the timing of ventilation?
Yeah, so the big thing is if the building itself isn't, if you want to call it like off-gassed or vented properly, since Chuggy's was closed up pretty tight, couldn't find any windows or open doors or anything like that. The timing of that ventilation can be crucial if not done properly. Whenever you go to establish that ventilation, it can start to build up, and then that fire can become free burning, and the flashover happens at any instant at that point.
Now, Mr. Silva, how did you proceed after establishing ventilation?
So that night, whenever we finished establishing ventilation, our incident commander cleared us to use something called the 2-in, 2-out method to further proceed.
And can you elaborate for the jury what this 2-in and a 2-out method is?
Yeah, it's pretty simple. It's something kind of like a buddy system, if you will. So you have two people that go into the building. It's their job to check to make sure that no one's in any harm or danger. If they are, it's their job to get them out as quickly as possible. Then you have two people on the outside. It's their job to listen for any signs of danger. At those first signs, it's their job to come into the scene and get us out as quickly as possible.
And on this night, July 31st, who were the two firefighters that entered the building of Chuggy's?
That night, it was myself and Jalen.
And who were the two who stayed outside?
The two on the out were Dakota and Kelly Dews.
Now, can you explain what happened whenever you and Jalen went into Chuggy's bar?
Yeah, so as soon as we went into the bar, that's, our time to kick into action, if you will. So we checked the upstairs main areas up there, and then downstairs. Fortunately, we didn't find anybody trapped or in any danger. So once we cleared out those main areas, we had to then proceed from downstairs back up to check one last little area before we could clear the scene.
Now, what happened when you went to check that last area?
Yeah, so once we got to the top of the stairs, there was a set of bathrooms that were immediately to our right. And I turned to Jalen and gave the signal that we were going to head right. Jalen ended up giving me the thumbs up, letting me know that he understood the plan of action. So I headed down the hallway towards the bathrooms, and was at that time whenever I ended up hearing a loud crash.
And can you explain what that loud crash was?
Yeah, so the loud crash ended up being the ceiling, part of the kitchen, or some whole conglomerate of things that ended up caving in. As soon as I heard the crash, my first thought is to, grab Jalen and get out of there as quickly as possible. But at that time, whenever I reached for Jalen, he wasn't there. So I was turning around frantically trying to figure out what was going on, and I couldn't find him at that time.
And did you end up finding out where Jalen was?
Yeah, so I had to run back down the hall to try and find out where he was. And the only thing that I could find that let me know where he was is I found his helmet sitting next to a pile of rubble.
So what happened after you saw where his helmet was?
So at that point in time, I was frantic. I was trying to get Jalen out as much as I could. I thought that there was still an opportunity maybe to save him or something. But Kelly and Dakota came running in to grab me and get me out. It was at this point in time whenever I noticed that there was the signs of what looked like a flashover about ready to occur.
And when you made it out of the building, what was happening at this moment?
Yeah, so as soon as we made it out, we were all lost, emotional. I mean, Dakota was beating the ambulance, crying. I think I was just in shock. We could not believe that that Jalen was gone.
And Mr. Silva, did a flashover occur this night?
Yeah, as soon as we left the scene.
Your Honor, at this time, I would re-raise my 701 objection, as this witness is giving an opinion about there being a flashover at Chuggy's Bar. That is outside the scope of 701, what a lay witness can testify to.
Your counsel?
Your Honor, Mr. Silva is just testifying to his rationally based perception on what he saw, the actions that he saw on July 31st of 2020, and just going into his knowledge.
Well, as I hear this developing, it's a little more than just describing the fact that something now has occurred. It seems to me that he has now made a flashover as something that is unique and peculiar, and something that is derived from his expert knowledge. I'd be happy to listen to a little bit more from you, Ms. Moore, but I think that's where I come out.
I can go ahead and I can just move on from that question, Your Honor.
Well, I'll sustain the objection. You won, Ms. Adams. You're ahead. I sustain the objection.
Motion to strike offending testimony.
Oh, I don't think well, I have to admit that as this proceeded, there was an awful lot of expert, it sounded to me like expert testimony that came in that you did not object to. That was after I made my ruling, is that when I started to hear that coming in. You didn't make that objection at that time. At this point in time, I don't believe he has given any testimony other than the fact that now, yes, there was a flashover. If what you're asking is that this particular statement, that yes, there was a flashover be stricken, that I can go with, but that would be the only thing that I would strike.
Yes, Your Honor.
All right, yes, I will grant that. I will grant that part of your motion.
And Your Honor, that's actually my last question. So thank you for your time, Mr. Johnson. I have no further questions.
All right, counsel, you may cross-examine.
May I proceed, Your Honor?
Yes, please.
Good morning, Mr. Silva.
Good morning.
You and the defendant have been friends for a few years now, right?
Yes, that is correct.
You're aware that she owns Chuggy's Bar.
Yes,
Now, after the renovations, you actually visited the bar, right?
yeah, there was initially some party or something like that that was going to be thrown, but, you know, ended up getting canceled, but eventually we finally made our way in.
You thought the place looked amazing, right?
Yeah, I mean, take it from an old dive bar, you know, any sort of change would look very, very different.
That's when the defendant told you that they got a $1 million loan for those renovations.
Yes, that is correct.
Now, after a while, the defendant started to complain about Chuggy's, true?
Yeah,
She said that things were just getting way too expensive.
yeah, I mean, you know, COVID ended up hitting the whole community really, really hard. So any business owner was just drowning in debt.
That's a yes to my question, that the defendant said that things at Chuggy's were getting too expensive.
Yes,
After that, she said that everything would be easier if she just torched the place, right?
yeah, yeah. Dakota had a like to make firefighter puns. We always got a weird crack out of it.
I'd like to talk about the night of July 31st now.
Okay.
You were at the fire station that night.
Yes, it was.
The defendant was also supposed to be at the fire station too.
Yeah, Dakota was there.
Well, the defendant actually wasn't there when you got there, was she?
I mean, no, I wasn't really sure when her schedule began.
You actually were confused because you hadn't seen the defendant for hours up until that point, right?
Yeah, I mean, as a volunteer, and I mean, unfortunately, your schedule kind of comes and goes, so not really in charge of that end of things. So yeah.
I'm not asking if you're in charge of the schedule. I'm just trying to clarify that the defendant was supposed to be there when you got there and she wasn't.
Well, again, I am not 100% sure of Dakota's schedule, so I'm not really sure when Dakota was supposed to be there.
Mr. Silva, it's true that the defendant did show up late for her shift, right?
I mean, Dakota showed up later, yes. Wouldn't necessarily say late.
Well, you just said that you were confused because you hadn't seen her for hours. Isn't that true?
I mean, I never said that. I just said hadn't really seen her for a while. Again, volunteers kind of have their own schedule, so it's not something that I'm in charge of.
Is it your testimony today that Dakota Sutcliffe did not come in late for her shift that night?
Yes,
And you prepared an affidavit for today's trial.
I did.
Permission to screen share what has been marked as this witness's affidavit.
Certainly, go right ahead.
You were told to be truthful in this affidavit,
That is correct.
and you were told to include any and all relevant information.
Correct.
And you had up until the start of opening statements today to add or change anything, right?
Correct.
I will now be screen sharing this witness's affidavit. If you could scroll down. Directing you to line 85. Oh, this is your signature at the bottom.
Yes, it is.
Directing you to line 85-ish. Please read silently as I read aloud. Dakota was also supposed to be on duty that night. I was surprised because I hadn't seen Dakota for several hours up until that point. Did I read that correctly?
Yeah, that is correct.
And nowhere in this affidavit did you say anything about what the defendant's schedule may have been that night.
Right, so I wouldn't have known if Dakota was late.
All right, you can stop screen sharing. Thank you. Redirecting you back to my initial question, just for clarity of the record, the defendant was supposed to be at the fire station that night, right?
I mean, yes, Dakota was there that night.
I'm not asking you if she was there that night. I'm just asking that she was supposed to be there that night when the call came in, right?
Yes.
All right, so when the call about Chuggy's Bar actually did come into the station,
Mhm.
the firefighters who were there, you all sprang into action, right?
Yeah, Dakota did the same.
We'll get to that in a moment, but when you heard the call, you all got in your gear as you testified to on direct,
That is correct.
and you filed down to the garage.
Well, our gear is located in the garage, so it's kind of a one-stop shop.
And as you were on your way to the garage, that's when you finally saw the defendant, right?
No, I mean, following your timeline, it would be as we were putting on our gear, whenever the call came in, Dakota was also there.
Well, Mr. Silva, you just said that you put on your gear as you're going down to the station, right?
No, what I said was that our gear is located in the garage. It's a one-stop shop.
Okay, so as you're going to the garage, just to clarify, that's when the defendant shows up, true?
I mean, I saw the defendant show up whenever I was putting on my gear.
So that's a yes to my question, that as you were on your way to the garage where your gear is, that's when you saw the defendant, right?
Then yes, sorry, I was struggling to follow the timeline.
No problem, Mr. Silva. Now, when the defendant finally came into the station, you noticed a strong smell, didn't you?
Yes, that is correct.
You thought that the defendant reeked of a chemical smell, right?
Yes,
And when the defendant finally came into the station, she said, Midland Center, I sure hope it's not Chuggy's Bar, right?
yeah, that was a joke that she liked to make very often.
The defendant actually never said that she was joking when she said that, did she?
I mean, at the particular time, probably not. I mean, we kind of understood at that point in time that it was just a joke.
You asked the defendant why they said that, right?
Correct.
And she just ignored you, didn't she?
Yeah, I mean, whenever you get a call in, you got a job to do, so it's not really time to chit chat.
All right, and now when you all did get onto the fire truck, you did find out that the fire was indeed at Chuggy's Bar.
That is correct.
And like you mentioned earlier, you and Jalen Williams were the ones to go inside the building.
Correct.
And when things got too dangerous, the defendant came and pulled you out.
Correct.
At that point, the defendant looked at you and said, I never meant for this to happen. Sure.
That is correct. She said something about this was all supposed to go to according to plan, and I mean, we were supposed to follow that 2 in, 2 out method, but unfortunately there was, I don't know what it was, but for some reason that was not followed.
Redirecting you back to my question, the defendant looked at you and said, "I never meant for this to happen," right?
Yes, it was all supposed to have followed a plan.
No further questions, Your Honor.
Redirect?
No, Your Honor, I just ask at this time the witness may be excused.
Yes, certainly may. I'm going to call your next witness.
Thank you, Your Honor. At this time, the defense would like to call Maddox Vaughn to the stand. Will you proceed, Your Honor?
Please proceed.
Thank you. Could you please state your name for the court?
Oh, why certainly. My name is Maddox Mad Dog Vaughn. But of course, that's what my friends like to call me. You can call this old dog Mr. Vaughn.
Mr. Vaughn, what do you do for a living?
Well, I'm the lead security officer down at the Jaywood building, where I mostly work nights from 12 a.m. to 8 a.m. Someone's got to keep a tight leash on the place.
And Mr. Vaughn, are you familiar with the establishment of Chuggy's Bar?
Oh, of course. Where I spend most of my nights at the Jaywood building, I spend most of my days at Chuggy's Bar, where I've gotten to know the owner, Dakota Sutcliffe, quite well.
Where did you first meet Dakota Sutcliffe?
Well, at none other than Chuggy's Bar. Back when ownership was with Jordan J.J. James, J.J. was the nickname I gave him, transferred ownership over to Dakota Sutcliffe in the summer of 2019, I believe.
Now, moving on to July 31st of 2020, were you at Chuggy's Bar on this night?
Why, yes, I had arrived at around 7:30 p.m. that night.
And at what time did you leave Chuggy's Bar?
I left when it had to close at about 9 p.m., I believe.
Mr. Vaughn, to be completely transparent with the jury, were you drinking on this specific night?
I mean, they don't call it Chuggy's for nothing. Yes, I had drinks at Chuggy's Bar and then proceeded to have drinks throughout the night, but it was spaced out.
And moving forward, after you left Chuggy's Bar, what did you do?
Well, I had just gotten back home and I live next to the Midlands Marina, you see, so I like to take my dog Bentley out for a walk. He's like that little Doge meme that the kids are always talking about. But yes, I went on a walk at the Midlands Marina.
And speaking of your walk, what time did you take this walk at the marina?
It was sometime before 11:34 p.m.
And did you see anything significant on your walk?
Why, yes, the reason why I said sometime before 11:34 p.m. is because that's actually when I saw good old Miss Dakota Sutcliffe at the marina.
And how did you know it was Dakota Sutcliffe at the marina?
Well, with all my time that I've spent at Chuggy's Bar, I'd be able to notice good old Miss Dakota Sutcliffe anywhere. I was sure to give her a wave, but she didn't see me. No hard feelings or nothing, though.
Was the marina dark at the specific time that you saw Dakota Sutcliffe?
Oh, no, actually quite the opposite, which is why I like taking walks at the Midlands Marina, you see. It's very well lit.
Now, moving along, so could you explain to the jury how frequently you drive from Chuggy's to the marina?
Oh, well, you see, I live next to the Midlands Marina, so I spend most of my days at Chuggy's Bar, so I make the drive quite frequently.
And how long do you think it would be for someone to, in your experience, to drive from Chuggy's Bar to the marina?
Ooh, well, I'm no Mathemahuza what's it, but I'd say it'd be maybe like an hour and 15 minutes if you were to hit every single light while it was green, and we know that don't happen. And if you were to speed, which no one ever does, you could maybe do 55 minutes.
And are you familiar with the path from the marina to the fire station of Midlands?
Yes, it's about 20 minutes closer, in fact.
Now, if someone, for example, were to leave the marina at say 11:30, at what time do you think that they would arrive to Chuggy's Bar?
Even at 11:30, hour 15 minutes, carry the one. I'd say they get there at maybe about 12:50.
Thank you, Mr. Vaughn. Your Honor, I have no further questions for this witness.
Ross?
Yes, Your Honor. Mr. Vaughn, the defendant is a good friend of yours. Is that correct?
Why, I'd certainly agree with that.
You would say that you have connected with the defendant in a way that you have not connected with most people.
Nope, not with most people, but with my dog Bentley, though, certainly.
You would even say that you owe the defendant a lot. Isn't that right?
Yes, I would say that I owe her a lot, but that doesn't mean I do anything. You see, I wouldn't lie or do anything that risks putting this mad dog in the doghouse, you see.
Redirecting you back to my question, you just would say that you owe the defendant. Is that correct?
Yeah, I'd agree with that.
And to clarify, you owe the defendant because the defendant once testified on your behalf in trial.
Why, yes. At one time, this mad dog didn't know his limits, but I've learned from the experience, and I have good old Mr. Code Sutcliffe to thank for that. But once again, I wouldn't do anything that risks putting me in the doghouse, you know?
And in this experience that you're referring to, you were facing up to 5 years of jail time. Is that correct?
Objection, Your Honor, more prejudicial than probative. If I
Your
may.
Honor.
No, I think I'll allow it. Overruled.
Yes, Your Honor. Mr. Vaughn, you were facing up to 5 years jail time, correct?
Yeah, that is correct. Like I said, back then I didn't know my limits.
But you never went to jail.
Nope, never went to the doghouse.
The defendant actually testified to your good character in that trial, correct?
But yes, good old Mr. Code Sutcliffe did. She's an absolute sweetheart, never hurt a fly.
And you believe that you got off of your jail time because of the defendant's testimony. Isn't that correct?
Yes, like I said, good old Mr. Code Sutcliffe took a stand there for me. But if you're insinuating that I'd do anything like that, I'm on probation, you see, so I can't risk doing anything like lying or anything that'll send me to the doghouse that I, got out of going to in the first place, if that makes any sense.
Yes, Mr. Vaughn, I'm not asking you to make any conclusions. I'm just asking for a yes or no here. You believe that you got off of your jail time because of the defendant's testimony. Is that correct?
Well, yes, I agreed with you.
Now, Mr. Vaughn, I'd like to move on to the night of July 31st. You mentioned on direct that you were at Chuggy's Bar that night.
Why, yes, I was.
And you mentioned that you got to Chuggy's around 7:45 p.m.
Yeah, that's right. I think I said 7:30, but it gets mixed up.
And when you mentioned that when you were at Chuggy's, you had a few drinks, correct?
Yes, I did. They call it Chuggy's for a reason.
For the clarity of the record, you started by having a couple of beers.
But 2 beers, to be exact. So a couple, yeah.
And then you followed that with vodka Red Bulls?
Yes, with 1 vodka Red Bull at the time when I was at Chuggy's Bar. It gives you a little, gets you going.
And after your hour and 15 minutes at Chuggy's, you then drove home, correct?
Yes, I did.
But before you left Chuggy's, the defendant actually kicked you out of Chuggy's that night.
Yes, there was this thing about another patron calling in sick, and it had to close at 9 p.m. that night, so that's why I was on my way out.
For clarity of the record, the defendant kicked out everyone at Chuggy's that night at 9 p.m.
Yes, Mystico Sutcliffe is an excellent rule follower. She was told she had to close down that night, and well, by golly, she did it.
And to be clear then, the defendant was the last person at Chuggy's.
I would assume so.
Mr. Vaughn, I'd like to move to your time at home then. To be clear, you continued to drink at home, is that correct?
Yes, I still had a few drinks while I was at home.
You had 2 more vodka Red Bulls.
Yes, 2 more.
You also had a shot of whiskey.
A shot of Emerson whiskey.
And then you went for your walk down at the marina.
Yes, I did.
Now, you go for these walks at the marina often, correct?
Why, yes, I do.
But you don't normally see people on this walk.
No, I normally don't see people on the walk, which is why originally I was confused on whether or not I'd actually seen Miss Dakota Sutcliffe there, but I saw her.
Mr. Vaughn, you claim to have seen someone on the night of July 31st for one of the first times ever on your walk.
Yeah, I had seen good old Miss Dakota Sutcliffe.
To be clear, when you were on this walk, you were continuing to drink from a flask.
Yeah, I was taking occasional sips from my flask of mine. You see, it gets quite cold sometimes, so it keeps you a little warm, if you know what I mean.
Mr. Vaughn, this flask contained whiskey, correct?
Why, yes, it did.
Now, I'd like to talk about the person that you claim you saw at the marina. They were 70 feet away from you, correct?
Yes, Miss Dakota Sutcliffe was 70 feet away when I saw her.
And you shouted out to this person.
I gave her a good old wave. I tried to get her attention, but she didn't see me.
But this person didn't respond to you at all.
Like I said, she didn't see me or respond or anything, no, but no hard feelings.
To be clear, you never went over to this person and said hello.
No, she didn't respond to me or anything, so I just figured good old Miss Dakota Sutcliffe was off doing her own thing, and my shift at the Jaywood building was starting soon, so I had to get going.
Mr. Vaughn, just a yes or no to my questions will do. You never got within 70 feet of this person, correct?
I was 70 feet away. I didn't get closer to her, if that's what you're saying.
And Mr. Vaughn, to be clear, this is one of your closest friends, and you never went closer and said hello?
No, she hadn't responded to me or anything. And like I said, my shift at the Jaywood building starts at midnight, and it was 11:34 a.m. So I just figured she was off doing her own thing.
Now, Mr. Vaughn, I'd like to talk about your knowledge of Chuggy's Bar. You said you were a frequent customer at Chuggy's, is that correct?
Yes, in fact, I was a 3-time customer of the month. I had my own bar stool, and they even had a picture of me framed up on the wall.
So, Mr. Vaughn, you were aware of the renovations at Chuggy's, correct?
Yeah, I'd helped out here and there to earn my keep.
And in the midst of the renovations, you once heard the defendant say it would be easier to torch the place and start over rather than renovate, correct?
Yeah, everything isn't quite as it seems. Miss Dakota Sutcliffe, a volunteer firefighter, she had these jokes, and not all of them hit, but trust me, Mad Dog's jokes didn't always hit either.
Mr. Vaughn, I'm not asking how this seemed. I'm not asking if it's a joke. I'm simply asking, did you hear the defendant say she'd rather torch the place than start over?
Yes, I had heard her say that.
Thank you, Mr. Vaughn. No further questions at this time.
Redirect?
Yes, Your Honor, just briefly. Mr. Vaughn, could you explain to the jury what you mean by you owe Dakota Sutcliffe?
Why, yes, as stated, I owe Miss Dakota Sutcliffe for everything that she's done for me, but I'm on probation, you see, so I wouldn't do anything such as lying in a court or anything that would send me to the doghouse, as I previously explained.
Thank you, Mr. Vaughn. Your Honor, I have no further questions.
All right. I believe that that witness may be excused. Do you have any further witnesses?
No, Your Honor, with that, the defense rests their case in chief.
All right, well then again, we'll have to rely upon our timekeeper to tell us how long we can leave until I guess 5 to 10 minutes again before we have the closing arguments.
Yes, Your Honor. I just talked to our timekeeper, and if 10 minutes is good with you, we'd love to take a 10-minute break before closing statements.
10 minutes will work for me. I will be here.
Yes, Your Honor.
All right, thank you.
Your Honor, the prosecution is back and ready to proceed whenever you're ready.
Is everyone back now?
The defense is also ready to proceed, Your Honor.
All right. Now, I'm not really sure how we do this. Obviously, it starts with the prosecutor, then defense, but do you get a second?
But even though we love the look, our break even is above the neighborhood cost.
I think that one of the spectators is unmuted or if all of the spectators could
Yeah.
mute themselves, that'd be awesome.
I don't know if you got my question. My question was whether or not you have the final closing after the defense, as it would be in a normal jury trial.
Yes, Your Honor. Any time that I have left over from my initial statement, I can use for rebuttal.
All right, fine. All right, well, then we will hear from you, counsel.
Yes, Your Honor. May I proceed?
Please.
Opposing counsel, members of the jury, may it please the court. She was running out of time. We've talked a lot today about the days and weeks leading up to the fire at Chuggy's on August 1st. But there's one day that you haven't heard about yet. Probably the most important day, and that's August 2nd. You see, when you go back into deliberations, you're going to have Exhibit 1 with you. Exhibit 1 is the autopsy report for Jalen Williams. Jalen Williams was a young man, a young firefighter, a hero in this community. And he was on duty that night and responded to the Chuggy's fire, looking for survivors. And you'll see that at 10:14 a.m. on August 2nd, he had to be autopsied. You'll see that his head was crushed under the debris of a collapsing ceiling. You'll see that an internal examination because the burns were so severe throughout his entire body.
Yeah, look at the color of that tree.
Of the jury. That is why we're here today. We are not just here because the defendant decided to burn down their bar for an insurance payout. We are here because she decided to burn down her bar for an insurance payout, and Jalen Williams, a young hero, lost his life. Members of the jury, we brought forth a charge of aggravated arson against the defendant. That means that we need to prove beyond a reasonable doubt 3 things. First, that the defendant committed an act of arson in order to defraud the bank. Second, that there was a substantial harm caused by this act. And third, that the defendant knew this was a possibility when they committed the act of arson. We already know what the harm is in this case, and we already know that Dakota Sutcliffe is well aware of the dangers of a fire. Her experience as a volunteer firefighter cannot be ignored. So let's take a step back. Let's talk about how we get there, how we know what we know, because this case doesn't start on August 1st. It actually starts in 2019, when the defendant takes out a $1 million loan for renovations on her bar, Chuggy's. She closes down for months and she makes this bar brand new. Everything done to the best extreme. But when they reopen in January, business isn't quite what they're expecting. The regulars aren't coming in like they used to. The college kids are still away. And so business declines. In February, Chuggy's employees even have to take a pay cut. But the defendant could have never predicted what would happen in March. Because on March 23rd, the governor ordered that all bars and restaurants were closed for COVID safety regulations. And seeing what was on the horizon, the defendant fires half of her staff the very next day. But that just wasn't enough. The bar is closed, there's no money coming in. And the defendant misses a payment to the bank in April, again in May, again in June. Money is piling up and piling up and piling up. And what is the defendant doing? Everything that she's supposed to. She is reaching out to the bank. She is asking for help. And the bank is granting those extensions, one after the other. But when the defendant misses another payment on July 15th, the bank finally says enough. Your sum of $20,000 worth of missed payments, that's due. August 1st, no more extensions. And the defendant knows she doesn't have that money. She knows that she's out of time to try to fix this situation. So what do desperate people do in desperate situations? She's going to lose the bar if she can't do something. She's going to lose everything. Unless she can make use of that insurance policy. She might lose the bar if she burns it to the ground, but she sure will walk away with quite a bit of money to start something new. Which is why on July 15th, just 6 minutes later, she sets that plan into motion. She makes sure that policy is still active, and it is. So on July 31st, just before the fire started, Chuggies receives shipments of gallons and gallons of paint thinner. Paint thinner that we know was the accelerant for the fire in this case. And just later that night, the defendant kicks everyone out. And she's alone. So what does she do? She sets that bar ablaze. And right as she is walking out, before any smoke can be detected, Skylar DeJong is there, and she is seeing the defendant fleeing the scene. Just minutes later, a 911 call reports the fire at Chuggies, and the defendant arrives for their shift, just as Miss DeYoung saw. And who responds to that 911 call? That's Jalen Williams. He searches for those survivors, and he loses his life. Members of the jury, there can be no doubt. Dakota Sutcliffe isn't an evil person, but she is a desperate person. And she was running out of time, and she needed a way to get that money. And so she did what desperate people do. She made a bad choice. But that bad choice cost someone their life. Follow the facts, follow the evidence, follow what you know to be true. Find the defendant guilty of aggravated arson. Tell her that she's out of time. Thank you.
Thank you, counsel. The defense?
Yes, Your Honor, may we proceed?
Please.
Thank you. May it please the court. Ladies and gentlemen, everything is not what it seems. Now, here's what we know. On July 31st of 2020, there was a tragedy that struck Midlands. A Midlands establishment, an institution, Chuggies Bar, was found burning to the ground. Now, people who responded to this fire included Mr. Silva, who you heard from today, my client, Dakota Sutcliffe, and a heroic firefighter by the name of Jalen Williams. Now, Jalen Williams went into that fire, and unfortunately, he lost his life. But ladies and gentlemen, this was not at the hands of my client, Miss Dakota Sutcliffe, because as we've heard here today, and what the facts will show you, is that everything is not what it seems. Now let's look at that burden that the opposing counsel, that the prosecution has brought forth today. That is one of aggravated arson, that they have to prove beyond a reasonable doubt. Now, what is beyond a reasonable doubt? Let's imagine, ladies and gentlemen, Imagine that you have a box, and in this box, you have a cat and a mouse, and you close this box. And after some time, you open it back up. The cat is there and the mouse is gone. Now, you weren't there to see what happened, but you can assume that the cat ate the mouse. But let's try this again. This time you place a cat and a mouse in a box, and you close that box, and you open it back up, and you see that the cat is there, the mouse is gone, but this time you see that there's a hole in the corner of the box. Now, do you really know what happened? Did the cat eat the mouse, or did the mouse escape through the hole? Ladies and gentlemen, this is because there are multiple possibilities of what occurred, just like there are with the facts of this case. Now, beyond a reasonable doubt is the highest burden in our judicial system. So let's break that down, ladies and gentlemen, today when looking at the facts of aggravated arson with those elements. Now, that first element that the prosecution has to establish today is that my client, Dakota Sutcliffe, committed an act of arson with the intent to defraud. Now, let's see what we know. We know that this fire was man-made and that paint thinner was used as an accelerant. But ladies and gentlemen, let's think back to all of the testimony you heard today. No witness today had testified that they saw Miss Sutcliffe pouring out gallons of paint thinner. No witness testified today, ladies and gentlemen, that they saw Miss Sutcliffe light paint thinner. In fact, no witness today, ladies and gentlemen, had testified to you today that Miss Sutcliffe was even interacting with this paint thinner at this point in time. In fact, what the prosecution wants you to believe is the impossible. They want to say that my client, Dakota Sutcliffe, was there at Chuggy's Bar around 11:59 p.m. But you heard today from Mr. Vaughn, a patron of Chuggy's Bar, who saw Miss Sutcliffe over an hour away at the Midlands Marina around 11:34 p.m. Now, this is impossible. How can my client be in two places at one time? It simply doesn't make sense. When we look to the intent to defraud, now you heard a lot today that Miss Sutcliffe was falling behind and behind on payments. And ladies and gentlemen, Chuggy's, the state of Midlands, they were not immune to the effects of the COVID-19 pandemic. In fact, none of us were immune to it. It hit Chuggy's hard. And Miss Sutcliffe did what she was supposed to. She asked for furlough upon furlough upon furlough. Miss Sutcliffe put her blood and sweat and tears into building this bar. It wouldn't make sense for her to burn it down. And you heard from forensic investigator, Detective Khan today, who stated that there was no fraud that occurred and that the renovations were not complete at Chuggy's Bar and that the payout would be $425,000. There would be no profit gained for Miss Sutcliffe. She would experience a loss of just a little under $1 million, ladies and gentlemen, but she also lost her friend in this process, Jalen Williams. So let's move along to that second element, which is the aggravating factor, that Miss Sutcliffe created substantial risk or harm to Jalen Williams. Now, ladies and gentlemen, this simply didn't occur. Miss Sutcliffe is a volunteer firefighter. That means she voluntarily runs into burning buildings to save those around her, to save and serve her community without pay, I might add. And from the testimony of Mr. Silva, you heard that Miss Sutcliffe goes above and beyond. And at this night, if she was away at the Midlands Marina, there was no way she could have set this fire. And after she saw that she lost her beloved friend, Jalen, she was pounding the ambulance, distraught, crying, because not only did she lose her business, but she lost something that was so much more important, her friend. Let's move along to that third element, which is the fact that she knowingly committed arson or knowingly committed an explosion or fire to the physical structure of Chuggy's Bar itself. Ladies and gentlemen, we've heard this, but let's see what else we've heard today. We heard that Miss Skylar DeYoung came and testified to you today that she had issues with Miss Sutcliffe after being let go. And that the few statements that she heard on a downtown night in mid-July with no context of what was going on, that Miss DeYoung so happened to be there alone on July 31st of 2020, walking past Chuggy's bar. She was there and was 50 feet away in a darkened place where there wasn't any lights, and she saw a figure. We hear from Dr. Jelani. She testified to you today that levels of low illumination, glare and shadow, the distance, all of these things can impact the testimony and the eyewitness account of an individual. But when we're moving further along, we see that there was 2 convicts who had no love for Chuggies, who went forth and were released from prison. Now, you had not heard the opposing counsel today state once about whether or not these people were there on that night or whether or not it could have happened, because there are more possibilities than it seems. Everything is not what it seems, ladies and gentlemen. Now we move on to that 4th element. This element that the opposing counsel had neglected to tell you about. Now, when you go back to your deliberation, there will be some jury instructions that will ask you whether Mr. Jalen Williams was emergency personnel pursuant to Midland's law. Now, ladies and gentlemen, Jalen Williams was a hero who died serving his community. But as we heard from the testimony of Mr. Silva, the 2-in, 2-out protocol was not established that night. Because that protocol was broken, according to the law, Mr. Jalen Williams was not emergency personnel. Ladies and gentlemen, we've seen that all 4 of these elements have not been proved to you today beyond a reasonable doubt. It is because of this and because of all of the multiple possibilities that have been presented to you today, from Miss Skylar DeYoung to the other convicts of Chuggies to the Breckenridge Fire Department, ladies and gentlemen, you must find Miss Sutcliffe not guilty of aggravated arson. Thank you.
Thank you, counsel. Ms. Prosecutor,
Yes, Your Honor. May I proceed with rebuttal?
please.
Defense counsel says that everything's not as it seems. Members of the jury, really ask yourself, is that true? Think about what we know. We know that one person was in serious debt that night. That one person was at risk of losing their source of income permanently. And that one person had an opportunity to make enough money to land them on their feet before they lost everything. That's what we know. We know that Dakota Sutcliffe was desperate. We know that Skylar DeYoung saw her outside of Chuggies. We know that even if there was low illumination, even if she was far away, she knows the defendant. And you heard opposing counsel's witness say that she is more than capable of recognizing that person based on the face that she saw and the person that she saw walking to the fire station. Opposing counsel has even come up here and asked you to consider Jalen Williams. Jalen Williams, the man who ran into Chuggies, the man who tried to find survivors, that he doesn't count as emergency personnel. That he doesn't count because his life was lost. Members of the jury, everything is exactly as it seems, because sometimes when everything is just too perfect, defense counsel will try to find someone else to blame. Follow your conscience. Find her guilty. Thank you.
Thank you, counsel. Thank both of you. I guess now the matter will be submitted to the jury, and we return, I guess, when we have a verdict.
Yes, Your Honor. Would you like us all to have our cameras turned on so that way you can see who we are in case you're still scoring or if the scoring judges is still
Oh,
scoring.
I'd love to see everybody. Absolutely. Absolutely. I guess I'm not supposed to tell you at this time that you did a magnificent job, but I think each of you did. And it's obvious there's an awful lot of great work that's gone into this. And there are a lot of things I envy, including your youth. But there's a lot of things that I envy. So give us a chance. And there's another judge here. I think I saw her on here before.
Yeah, I'm right here.
There you are. And she and I will now go out to the jury room, and our instructions aren't as clear as I'm sure the ones that you would have posted to the jury in this case. So we'll be back as soon as we have a conclusion. I think now I finally, after all this, got a ballot. So I now can go to the ballot, and we shall return. How about that? Thank you. Oh, boy. Well, I don't know that I can get back to the ballot. If the fellow who's been working with me here all this time can get me back to the ballot, I'd appreciate it. And I can complete my ballot. There he is. Thank you. There it is. There's Mr. Boyd. I'll get there and return.
Okay, so you're all good?
Yeah, Mr. Boyd, if you will get me back to that ballot that I've been working on, I'd appreciate it, but I don't have the link anymore.
I will resend you the link. Just give me 1 minute here. Okay, I've just sent you the link to the page again, and you should be able to open that and get back to the ballot.
I got it now. That'll do it, and then I'll get back. Thank you.
Okay, I'll just hang out here, and then once everything's submitted, I'll make sure we got it on our end, and then you can do comments. So I'll just hang out.
I think I submitted my ballot.
Let me take a look. Yes, Ms. Lopez, I can see yours. So
Great.
Mr. Emery, just when you're done, hit submit, and I'll make sure we got it, and then I'll leave you all to comments. So just hang tight for the moment, everyone.
God damn it.
Is everything all right?
No,
Do you have physically written down scores? All right, Mr. Emery, it looks like we have your ballot, so you should all be good to do comments. And then everyone, once you're done, will be pairing round 2. So if you want to watch, come to tab room. And judges, thank you again for judging.
Well, Ms. Lopez, I'll yield to you.
All right. I just want to say that I think that everyone did a great job. The prosecution, the defense, and the witnesses. I thought it was really interesting to watch. Can you hear me? Sorry. Okay, good. Because yeah, okay. Yeah, so I thought it was really great. I gave individual comments on the ballot because I'm not sure about like doing that right now, but like overall, I thought it was done really well, and I liked the emotional pull of both sides. I thought it was a great story, and I thought you all did like really well capturing my attention, keeping me in for a few hours, and like having good tone throughout it as well. I thought you all did a great job. So it was really interesting, and I'm glad I got to judge this particular section right here. So I really enjoyed it.
Well, thank you. I have listened to through the years to an awful lot of opening and closing arguments. I have to tell you that one of the best descriptions I have ever heard of what is beyond a reasonable doubt is the one that was given today. I don't know where you got that, if it has been used before by someone else, but it is absolutely excellent. It borders on the best, if not the best, that I've ever heard, because that is it's a difficult concept, and you have to recognize that the juries that are sitting on a trial of any kind, a criminal trial, first of all, they have now finally got the pistol in their hand, and it's, they can do some damage here now to somebody. So they're very interested in what's going on and what they can do. And reasonable doubt is extremely difficult to in my mind, to explain. But this one is absolutely one of the best, and I commend you on that. Secondly, the pieces, I guess the PowerPoints that you had for the opening and for the closing, both for the both sides, those are really excellent. And if you do them right, and if you share them beforehand, you have something that you can take into be taken into the jury room, and it's difficult to get it in there, but something like that to get into a jury room is par excellence. And then finally, from my perspective, you all snatch at the cross-examination, and that's, to my mind, cross-examination is a really difficult and a specialty for good cross-examination. Although I've done it, I don't know how many times, I've never considered myself to be someone who is really capable of doing the best job, but it is very difficult to do cross-examination. And the one thing that you want to concentrate on is to concentrate just exactly what it is that you think is not just that you want, but that you think is necessary to come out of cross-examination, because it's as at least as a criminal prosecutor, it's the most dangerous place where you are, because you don't have the discovery in the criminal law as you do in civil cases. And when you ask a question, you don't know 9 times out of 10, or maybe 9.5 times out of 10, what the answer is going to be. And the many times I have seen even my own cases blow apart by a question that I thought I knew the answer to, and up pops says something else. Now, I must admit too, I started out, and I forget who was the fellow who was the drinker. Was that Silva or yes, Mr. Flanders. I started out being at first being upset a little bit by the character that you thought you were portraying. And if your testimony had only gone on for 3 or 4 minutes, I would have said, well, I don't know. But I must say that by the end of your testimony, and you jumped on me here now. By the end of your testimony, I knew the witness. And you perfectly, to my mind, portrayed that witness. And by doing that, I think you significantly helped the case. But that goes. The final thing is really, I've done these mock trials a number of times, and I'm always glad that I'm no longer really practicing, because I'd have to meet one of you someplace on the other side, and what you all are you're doing great jobs, I think. Now, can somebody tell me, I think you're allowed to do it now, where are these teams from?
The prosecution is from the University of Illinois in Urbana-Champaign.
Can't hear that. From where?
The University of Illinois in Urbana-Champaign.
Oh, boy. And how about the defense?
The defense is from Missouri State University in Springfield, Missouri.
Oh, boy. Well, you all have probably a lot of snow where you are right now. I'm in Fredericksburg, Virginia, and but I spent years in Pittsburgh, and if I never see another snowflake, it's probably going to be too early, so. But I commend you all. I really, and I see you going far. I know I'm on the down in the last number of these these cases that are being heard and for all these times. And my one shame is that I expect to see you all in the finals, and because now will not be unable to participate with you. It's been a really great pleasure. Thank you. Thank you very much. And I'm going to sign off now that I know how to do it.
Thank you guys both for judging this round. We really appreciate you guys committing time to judge for us.
Well, thank you. I've truly enjoyed it. And I know I will see your teams out at the end.
Good luck, everyone.
Right. Bye.